What's the creepiest thing you've experienced out of nowhere? I was walking down the street when I saw a rusty nail in the road. I picked it up and threw it into an empty house's yard. That's not helpful, I know, but after I threw the nail, a man came out of what I thought was an empty house and shouted at me. I freaked out, thinking it was about the nail, and I kept walking towards my house. The guy didn't sound mad, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. He started following me onto the street and gesturing for me to come over, but my gut told me to keep on walking. I got home and see from my house, the empty house is now surrounded by cops. At this point, I still think it's about the nail. After a while, it gets worse and men in full gear show up. I found out later that the house was indeed empty, the men inside were known criminals, and I very much almost ended up a hostage. I dodged the frick out of that bullet. While cutting lawns along this bike trail, me and a coworker found a mostly decayed, severed from the knee down leg. The cops were called, they questioned us, and we never found out any more about what happened. Pretty creepy. That is creepy. I really wish the police would offer some kind of closure for the people who report crimes like this. Years ago, in the early 90s, my boyfriend was driving me home and we saw a man lying on the ground in the strangest position, kneeling with his head on the ground and bent at a sharp angle so that he faced the street. It was 2 a.m. and the man was covered in sweat with his eyes open. We pulled over and I hopped out of the car to check on this guy. His eyes were wide open and he seemed like his face wasn't moving, but it really felt like he was pleading for help. He didn't respond at all when called out to. No blinking, just glassy eyes. I reached out to touch him and he was ice cold. I'm sure he wasn't breathing. This was before cell phones, so I hopped back in the car and we sped back to my house to call 911. 10 minutes later, the police called back to ask for the cross streets again. Apparently they arrived at the corner and there was nothing there. I verified that they had the right spot and they said they'd call back if they needed any more information. That was the last I ever heard about it. I checked the newspaper for the next few weeks, but we never found out anything else about that man. Yeah, that one would haunt me for decades to come, and evidently our author has been thinking about it since then. I do wonder what would have happened if you had the tech necessary to call the cops and remain at this guy's side. Would you have witnessed a sudden recovery? A kidnapping by his attackers? Spooky. I worked from 2 p.m. through 11 p.m. at a gas station in one of the nicer cities around here, and I had a gentleman look me in the eyes and ask if I'm enjoying my last day on Earth. They walked away before I could answer. Power plant worker here. During shutdown, the large main steam valves tripped shut, and the subsequent water and steam hammer to the main lines was so intense, the pipes literally jumped a few feet. I thought that place was coming down around me. The sound and shaking was so violent. Like, check my pants scary. We're talking about steam temperature and pressure that can instantly flash the entire building if there's a branch, cooking everyone inside. Even a pinhole leak has the power to cut a person in half. Seriously scary crap when things don't go right. The summer after I graduated from high school, I left work early and went up to my parents' cabin in northern Michigan. I spent that night at the beach watching the sunset. Once the sun went down and it became nearly pitch black, because there's no light pollution, I got to my car and started driving down the highway, M22. After about 10 seconds of being at speed, there was an older Tahoe from the late 90s that started riding my butt and flashing its high beams. So I got up to about 60 in a 45 lane, and they were still on my tail. I pulled off to the side of the road that my parents' cabin is off of, and they took the same turn. I thought this seemed weird because there's only about 30 to 40 homes on that road, so I went all the way to the end, which is usually a dead end, but leads to a maintenance area for the golf course nearby. The truck was still following me. At this point, I was freaking out because if I pull into the house, they'd know where we lived, and they were still following close behind us. I took a ton of random turns, and the truck kept following every single turn for about 15 minutes. I finally had a chance to make a turn with traffic going through the intersection that gave me a few seconds of head start. I pulled down a side street, went up 100 yards, turned off all of my lights and waited. The truck slowly drove by the perpendicular street and kept going. I booked it home, pulled my car around the side from the main road, and pulled every curtain. For an 18-year-old, I was scared as heck that night. I worked for Radio Shack back in the late 90s and I was scheduled to open on a Saturday morning. I go into the door, lock up behind me and go to the back to get things ready, only to see my boss sitting at the chair in the back with his tie around his neck and tied up to an inventory rack with his pants around his ankles. That's the day I started drinking heavily. I often visit Walmart in the wee hours of the morning. One time I went in at about 2 a.m. and noticed an elderly gentleman asleep on one of the mobility scooters at the entrance. When I left about 20 minutes later, he was still there. I thought it was a little odd no one from the store had woken him up, but whatever. I found out the next day he had died and spent the better part of a day on display as a corpse at the entrance to Walmart. My 3-year-old, who's normally very happy-go-lucky, was extremely concerned the other day. He kept looking around the room talking about the rhino. Who knows what a 3-year-old might translate as a rhino? This went on for about 20 minutes. He was very concerned and looking around the entire time. So we got to a point where he says the rhino is moving. My wife asks where the rhino is. He's coming to Daddy. Yeah, so I'm Daddy and my butt puckered just a little bit at that moment. Fast forward about 4 days to last night, and the same kid starts talking about the ghost. My daughter asks my son, where is the ghost? And he says, he's biting Daddy. What the actual frick? I was ambling down an old country highway in northwest Georgia on my motorcycle, a 750 Vulcan, when I spotted an ambulance coming the opposite way. I pulled over, and a pickup truck pulled over behind me. In my rearview mirror, I see the passenger get out with a baseball bat and start hustling my way. I didn't even look, I just dropped it into gear and hauled butt. What followed was the most harrowing experience I've had in my life as this pickup truck proceeds to chase me all over the place for about 20 minutes. I'm unfamiliar with the area and my bike wasn't meant for going fast around turns, so I've got no room for error and it's all I can do to stay in front of these guys. I'm blowing through 4-way intersections in a bid to get some distance and come up with a plan, but they're all hellbent on catching me. I finally managed to get pointed towards the highway and into the cover of other cars, but then traffic stops on a bridge. The truck is 3 cars behind me, and I'm thinking if I can just get out to the highway, I'm probably home free because my Vulcan can go fairly fast in a straight line. In my mirrors, I see that the passenger is snaking through the cars on the bridge, so I lane split, which is illegal in Georgia, and make the on-ramp. I hammer down and I'm gone, baby, gone. Never went back to that town. As far as I know, this was an unprovoked attack of the hillbilly variety, because prior to the ambulance, I hadn't even seen another vehicle. I don't ride particularly fast and I don't believe in loud pipes. I got lucky as heck seeing him come up behind me like that. I wonder if he wanted your bike or what the goal was there. I mean, was he just going to go into a protracted beatdown with the possibility of other cars coming by? Honestly, you were probably praying to be pulled over by a cop during that entire chase. Our old house was on a corner, and in lieu of a backyard, it had a side yard with a small deck that was wrapped around the back. The dining room had patio doors that led out to the back, and we'd have barbecues and such back there. When I was about 14, we only had one desktop computer and one laptop for the family. My brother and I would fight over the desktop, that's where Diablo 2 was installed, so I'd use the laptop to write music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over, and they were downstairs doing whatever, and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapping up in my writing, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock on the patio door, which startled me. I looked up, expecting my brother or his friend. The basement had a door that led to the back deck, so I thought maybe they were coming in. Standing at the door and waving was a person of indeterminate gender or age wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother or his friend, I mouthed, "Good one," and gave the person the finger, and they walked away. As soon as they left, I went downstairs to give them crap, and to my surprise and dismay, they were both sitting on the couch playing PlayStation. They swore up and down it wasn't either one of them, and I knew there was no way one of them would have had time to get downstairs and unmask before getting on the couch. To this day, I have no idea who it was that knocked and waved. In short, a creepy mother effer in a mask knocked on my patio door and waved. It wasn't anyone I knew. I cocktail waited on a day shift at a small casino in Idaho for about 6 months during a bad time in my life. So basically everything sucked there, but especially this one guy, not very old either I'd guess, in his mid to late 50s, who had a stroke at a nickel slot machine. He crapped himself but then dragged himself back to keep playing while EMS was on the way. I was out to lunch in Midtown Atlanta with some co-workers. We sat out on the patio. There are some high-rise condos right across the street. Some guy jumped from his 40th floor balcony and splattered all over the roof of someone's Jetta. Everything went everywhere. The noise was pretty memorable as well. We noped out of there before ordering. It was a very silent ride back to work. One of my co-workers said he won't sit out on patios anymore while eating.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I was working in an office pretty late. I'm 100% sure I was the only one there. The AC system shuts down at like 7 p.m, and until it does, you won't notice how much noise it's actually making. The office then got extremely quiet, which is unsettling to begin with, and I had my office door closed. About 30 minutes later, I hear the muted voice of a little girl with a heavy British accent saying, "Mummy, I think he's in this one." Note that I live in the American South, so there's no good reason for a British child to be there. I almost crapped my pants as the door cracked open ever so slightly until a real live little girl popped her head in and says, "Oh, no, sorry, wrong one." It turns out her American stepfather was still in the building. 18 years old and first time ever operating a dozer with an open air cab and roll cage. I was clearing trees out of a waterway on a farm. All of a sudden, I'm knocked out. I come to and blood is running down my face into my lap. Dozer is pushing up against a tree, just spinning its tracks. My head and neck hurt. I thought I'd been shot or something. No idea. There's nobody around me. I wasn't told how to shut off the dozer as it was an older 6C. You don't just turn the key off. I called my dad and he runs over and pulls the idle bar all the way down and it shuts off. We're both clueless as to what happens when he sees a branch behind my head that must have driven through the window and pushed it pretty far, and it snapped back into the cab and hit me in the forehead. Never saw it or anything. I once found the corpse of a coworker. The guy just didn't come into work one day. He didn't call, he was very reliable, lived alone, and didn't have many friends outside of work. So I went over to his place and convinced his landlady to let me in. I found a body in his armchair in front of the TV. Heart attack. He had been dead for about 12 hours at that point. 25 years later, and I still remember the grimace of pain permanently etched on his dead face like it was yesterday. I used to work at a tanning salon, and one day while I was alone during my early morning shift, I heard what sounded like a full-grown man running down the hallway. I looked and there was nothing, just me. No machines were on yet, no one else was in the building. I sat in the office until my coworker arrived. You know what, for all the awful and disfiguring things that can happen in a tanning salon, not least that awful scene in one of the Final Destination movies, I'm happy enough that this was all that happened to you. I once worked as a live-in staff member in a college dorm. During the summer, we housed the few summer school students who remained on campus, nearly 30 of them. It may be significant to point out these students tended towards the highly academically motivated, oftentimes high-stress students, even if they were quiet. One warm day in late June, my office received a call from a concerned sibling that she and her family were unable to reach her brother who lived by himself in a room on the summer school floor. This wasn't unusual, as our office frequently dealt with students avoiding their kith and kin due to frayed nerves or general social awkwardness. Our normal protocol to check in on a student is to try and reach them by our emergency contact information. Failing that, go check their room to verify they're living in the building and perhaps available then and there, and then have them call their family to verify that we followed up on the original request. Also, we're to only enter a room with another staff member present to ensure personal safety of staff and students. I failed to reach the student on his room and mobile phone and was working short-staffed, so since I was on my own, I decided to pop up to his room and check on him. I arrived at his floor at about 2 in the afternoon, and the floor seemed deserted as I'd expected. I found his room number and immediately noticed the sound of a movie playing on a TV or computer from behind the door. I knocked 3 times and announced that I was a staff member checking on his health and safety. No answer. I didn't think this was that remarkable. College students are notorious for leaving electronics running while not in the room. I checked the floor showers and bathrooms and found them deserted. I returned to his door and knocked 3 more times, waiting 20 seconds between each knock. No answer. This is when my instincts started to buzz. I worked in residence halls a number of years as a professional, and something about all the pieces of this puzzle just weren't adding up. Family concerned about his health and safety, electronics running, someone must have started them recently within the time frame of a movie runtime, summer school students and their idiosyncratic behavior, something just wasn't right. I was by myself, so I probably let myself get more worked up than if I was with someone else. A deserted dorm floor, even at 2 in the afternoon, oftentimes evokes Kubrickian memories of the Overlook Hotel. I decided that for some sense of closure or sanity, I needed the immediate resolution of keying into the student's room, even though I was by myself and not technically supposed to do so. I knocked on the door one more time for good measure, again announced myself as the hall director, then keyed into the room and my spider sense went off even stronger. The room appeared relatively vacant. The student appeared to be living out of a suitcase, which is unusual for someone staying no less than 8 weeks for a summer school session. The bedding was tousled like someone had been sleeping in it, and all the lights in the room were on. As I'd suspected, there was an open laptop on his desk running on battery power, playing The Matrix, but no student. I began to start rationalizing to keep from feeling unsettled. Surely this student and I had crossed paths on my way to his room before. I'd never met him, so I wouldn't recognize him otherwise. And maybe he was just down in the lobby picking up delivery food or a late lunch. Sure, that's it. Then I turned to leave, planning on trying to reach the student later in the afternoon or that night. As I turned to leave, I noticed another odd piece of evidence: the accordion closet doors. These are generally removed in most rooms due to disuse, particularly single rooms like this, and they were still in his room, and they were closed. Odd. I couldn't remember the last time I saw someone actually use these cranky, dysfunctional doors. Then my intuition spiked higher than ever. Crap. I realized I was alone in a room with a potentially self-deleted student who may in fact have completed just that process. And I'm about to be that guy who discovers the body and then has a crap ton of paperwork and undesirable tasks, not the least of which would be calling the family back to break the news. I felt like I was talking to myself when my voice cracked as I spoke to the closed doors and announced my name and title and that I'd be opening those accordion doors in 3 seconds. I fumbled with the latch on the doors and finally managed to get them disengaged, and as I slid the doors apart, I was unprepared. I didn't know what I really expected. Something hanging there, a bullet wound. I'll tell you what I didn't expect. A 7-foot, dark-skinned Indian man staring at me embarrassingly as though I'd found his secret hangout. We stared at each other for a good 15 seconds without blinking, breathing, or speaking. I finally realized what was going on, and my natural emotion was disbelief. All I could think of to say was, are you in here hiding from me? He looked at me and said, yeah. My heart was still racing. I turned to leave, and before I shut his door, I turned back to him and said, call your sister, she's worried about you, and frankly, I am too. In short, I met an Indian in the cupboard. Literally. Scared the crap out of me. You know what? I think I would have screamed no matter whether the person on the other side was alive or not. Honestly, the lead-up and suspense dictated I'd be screaming at the highest pitch I'm capable of. Glad the guy was okay. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old couple come through my line buying a wok. The husband, who was at least 85, started making conversations with me about the wok and asked if I liked Chinese food. Yeah, I like Chinese. Do you want to go out with me to get some Chinese? He winks at me. No, sir. Oh, well. He looked a bit disappointed and turned to look at his wife, who was on the phone with someone. Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement? No. The rest of the transaction took place in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I wonder to this day if he was trying to joke because he sounded so sincere, or if he was suffering from dementia or something else that made him not realize how creepy that sounds to someone young enough to be your great-grandchild. I'm a teacher of adult students, and one student of mine is kind of intense and creepy. Actually, she's based at another school but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she started giving me welcome presents as I was new to the country. Just simple things like food, postcards, and books, which was a nice idea but seemed a little excessive. She added me on social media and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months and figured that she had just gone back to her own school or stopped studying or whatever, and was relieved that she had clearly got bored of me. But then last week she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me during lessons that she had taken, without me knowing. I was a little weirded out, to say the least. I wouldn't worry about me too much though. The girl's creepy, but she's just young, in her 20s, and interested in the foreign teacher. No restraining order necessary. This is China, and I get a lot of weird attention for being foreign here. This just happens to be one of the more standout cases. That being said, if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, well, you know what happened. Hearing music that isn't actually playing from the store speakers, it's quiet, but it's there. Given the crap I was dealing with at the time, I'm fine writing it off as hallucinations or delusion. I work in a supermarket in the early shift, and part of my job is changing the shelf labels for the price changes each day. Just this last Wednesday gone, I was putting new labels on a shelf of hand soap when, about 2 feet along the shelf from me, a bottle shot off and landed in the middle of the aisle. I looked along the aisle at my colleague and she just shrugs her shoulder and says, happens all the time. I never directly witnessed anything else, but being one of the first on the shop floor each day, I'm now questioning all of the items that I see sitting in the aisles first thing, and guessing that I can't blame untidy customers for all of them. What salesperson self-owned and lost your business? I've begun researching my next car. I'm not looking to make a purchase for the next few months, but I like to do my homework. I had a couple of meetings cancel on me one day, so I decided to run by the closest Hyundai dealer to see their new hybrids in person. I'm currently a Honda guy. I had a great conversation with the actual salesman, a good test drive, and he understood my plans. We returned to the dealership and I grabbed a booklet on the Ioniq as he went to take the keys back and find me a business card. In the meantime, his sales manager approached me and asked 4 times, "What do I need to do to get you to leave in a new Hyundai?" Refusing to listen to what both the salesman and I were saying. To top the visit off, the manager grabbed my hands and began to pray that I would wise up and get a Hyundai. Over the next 36 hours, I received 11 phone calls and text messages from the dealership, attacking me about getting back in to buy and eventually accusing me of only going in for the test drive gift card promotion that I wasn't aware of. I was at a furniture store looking for a new dresser. I found one for a reasonable price and might have come back after doing some more shopping around if the salesman hadn't tried to upsell a couch despite me saying repeatedly that we do not need a couch. That's why I like IKEA. It's cold and impersonal, which should incidentally be Sweden's national motto. But then what will Finland's be? Cold, impersonal, and violently drunk. A car salesman told me the van I was looking to buy had brand new brakes and tires. God man, pick something less obvious to lie about. I just went back to the van, checked, and sure enough the tires were almost bald and the rotors were grooved to the touch. He got his manager involved and now they're trying to convince me that the work was done. Like how? But I'm apparently an idiot. They didn't say that, but they knew I caught them in the lie, so I just left. This experience was the last straw and it convinced me to buy a brand new car instead. The narrator has done a bit of pre-reading and it seems like the absolute worst of our stories are mostly car dealer related, which just goes to show what many of you have been writing in the comments is correct. Half the people working in dealerships are basically your high school bullies after finding out they weren't qualified to do anything else. Asked a Subaru salesman what the best price he could give me was on a 2014 Crosstrek with 40k miles. He told me the same price that a brand new one goes for. I informed him of that and asked why I'd buy this one for that price instead of just buying a new one. All he said was that they hold their value really well. That was the end of my search at that dealership. I love Subarus. My experience at the dealership was similar. I'd researched online, even emailed back and forth with the dealer and had a price set, but I needed to drive it first. Went in, drove the car, dealer came into me with a price $2,000 over the sticker price and $4,000 over what they'd agreed with online. I'd pulled up my email on the phone and showed it to the manager and left with the car for the price I wanted. But my god, I was livid when they pulled the over the sticker price BS. Called me about 20 times in the course of 3 days while we were in the ICU with our 3-year-old daughter due to a medical emergency. They wanted us to set up an appointment to get a roofing quote. We explained to them multiple times what had happened to stop and would call them back, but they kept calling. I finally went off on the poor lady who called the final time and she apologized so much, but the damage was done and we never called back that particular service. I had a salesman ask to speak to my husband instead of me, as he would never let his wife handle such a big financial decision. Did that go as well as I think it did? Oh, much worse. When I was just out of school and looking for my own car insurance, my dad helped me narrow down companies and contacted an agent for me to get the ball rolling. The agent called me to go over things, but then started trying to upsell me a renter policy on top of the auto policy. Oh, your dad asked me to also set this up for you. No, he didn't. Lying is not a good way to get business from me. Went to a Honda dealership to look at a Civic, and the sales guy told me that they didn't have any in stock somehow. He showed me an Accord, which was nice and all, but I was looking for something cheaper and with better MPG. He tried to convince me to buy it by saying it was heavier, which meant it was more reliable. I laughed at him and left. Told a car salesman that I wanted my wife to look at the car, so I'd be coming back. He went and got the sales manager, who proceeded to sit down across from me and say the words I won't forget. Let me ask you a question. Whose money is it, yours or hers? I looked at him in shock and politely stood up and left. Never been so stunned by a salesman before or since. Years ago, my sister-in-law, my brother's girlfriend at the time, was looking at apartments with her best friend. At one location, one of them asks some oddly specific questions about something, like do the pipes make noise at night, and the landlord replied, "Is this in regards to the alleged haunting?" He started hitting on my wife, thinking the minivan was for her. What a fool. He should have been hitting on you the whole time. You can do all kinds of things back here, maybe even with the guy who'll sell it to ya. Wink. We felt really talked into the whole thing, and when he was finally lining up the paperwork, he high-fived his manager. We walked away. I was trying to buy a Honda and apply the Honda graduate program. Was signing papers for the keys when I noticed the missing amount. The sales manager told me I was getting such a good deal they couldn't add that on top. So I stopped signing and told him I'm no longer buying and won't be negotiating. The look on his face was excellent as I got up to leave. I got an even better deal no more than a week later. Looking at some lower-end sporty cars, I know my way around a motor. A guy pops the hood and says, "We like to leave everything exactly the way it was when we buy it from someone. It has a cheap falling-apart intake, oil spilling from both valve covers. I get inside, there's sticky black stuff around the shifter, the car smells, but damn, they couldn't even be bothered to clean the damn car or spray in some Febreze." You'd be surprised at how common this is. Dealers love to cut corners on trade-ins and will do the bare minimum, sometimes not even that, to get the car on the lot. The sales manager at the dealer I used to work at got in a huge fight with one of the mechanics because the mechanic was inspecting a trade-in and found many serious mechanical problems. By that, I mean problems that would lead to the engine catching fire or the driver getting stranded on the side of the road. The manager told the mechanic not to fix these problems, but instead cover them up to the best of his ability. The mechanic refused to comply and a screaming match ensued. The manager ended up getting someone else to do the cover-up job. That's why it's really important to have an experienced mechanic or at least a knowledgeable car person inspect a used car before you decide to buy it. When I was in the army, I went to Best Buy to buy a car stereo. After picking one out and talking to the sales rep while we waited for another rep to grab the radio from the back, the rep I was talking to started talking to me about God and how women are demons and I need to stay away from them. At this point, I didn't really know what to say, so I just tried to change the subject. He then asked me if I had a girlfriend. I told him yes, but she's been in Afghanistan for the last 6 months. He then told me that her being deployed is a blessing in disguise because now she won't tempt me into committing sin. I just walked out after that. I was too shocked to actually say anything. I was at the VW dealership and told him I was also thinking of looking at Hyundai. The salesman told me to think twice, because if I get a Hyundai, I'd better also get good insurance, because I'm going to crash and or die in that car. I got a new salesman, and I still got a VW. I can imagine that this is something a salesman could possibly allude to happening at the very end of a sales pitch if they feel like their customer's about to walk away and they have nothing to lose anyway. Even then, it's a bit weird, but opening with that is just hilariously bold and a wild thing to do. On an unrelated note, if you don't watch all of the videos on our channel, you will get diabetes and or die. Allegedly. Don't fact check. My dad and I were out shopping for my first car. Me being 16 and stupid, I found a used Challenger that I wanted desperately. And to my immense surprise, my dad agreed to co-sign for me. As my dad and I were negotiating the price of the car and what things the dealership could add to sweeten the deal, the salesman implies that I, my father's 16-year-old daughter, was his other woman, and that my 42-year-old father was going through a midlife crisis. My father went white as a sheet, and then the same beautiful cherry red of the Challenger. And needless to say, I did not get that car. Instead of getting a cool car that I would have inevitably gotten a surplus number of speeding tickets with, I bought my aunt's '99 Ford Explorer. After replacing parts of the AC system, it runs like a champ. I love that SUV. Yes, the insurance would have been absolutely astronomical if I'd actually managed to get the Challenger. In hindsight, I'm fairly certain it was my dad attempting to show me how to buy a car from a dealership. 16-year-old me thought he was cool as heck for at least entertaining the idea. And no, my father is not Roy Moore. We're from Georgia, not Alabama. You've got to wait till they're 18 to boink your relatives in Georgia. We went to buy an engagement ring, and the salesman looked at me right when we walked in the door and said, "We don't sell children's rings here." I was 27 at the time, and yes, petite. We went elsewhere. I'm a girl. My boyfriend got me into motorcycles a few years back, and I was determined to buy my own. Once I had the money for one, we went to a handful of dealerships around town. Only one guy at one of the dealerships actually talked to me about buying a bike. Everyone else would look straight at my boyfriend and answer the questions I was asking. There were several places we ended up walking away from even if we knew that they had a decent option for me, all because they didn't believe that I actually knew enough of what I was talking about to buy my own bike.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
GNC. I told the guy I was looking for a pre-workout and he asks what I usually use. I told him and he literally laughed at me, then shows me a bunch of new brands that cost about twice as much. Meanwhile, he's throwing out a bunch of scientific nutritional terms. I left and I haven't been back. Not me, but my parents. My mum and dad were meeting with a sales guy who worked for a pool company when they were looking to get a pool built. He was a standard sales guy, and at one point he tried to mention some add-on or something. My mum started to interject, and the sales guy was basically like, "Oh, don't you worry. Why don't your husband and I talk about the money details?" He said a few other things along those lines and was overly condescending, the whole, "How about you sit tight while the men talk business" sort of mentality. My mum looked at the guy for a second, then to my dad, and then stood up and said, "You know what? I think we're done here." As she and my dad stood up to leave, the sales guy apparently kind of stammered, then smirked, looked at my dad and said, "Oh, come on, okay, let's continue," thinking it was some kind of joke. My dad responded, "Nope, you heard my wife, we're out of here." And that was that. I was broke but desperately needed a new car, so I went down to a local dealership to see if they had anything with a monthly payment that I could afford. I handed over the keys to my car so they could do an appraisal, but I didn't even get a chance to fully explain my situation before they were shoving me in an Infiniti I knew was beyond my price range. I test drove it just to humor the sales guy while explaining that I needed something cheaper than this, but he just kept saying, "We'll see how the financing works out." We get back to the dealership and he tells me he wants to run my credit. The pushiness has already turned me off completely, so I've already decided I'm not buying from them. I tell him no. He looks at me like I just threw number 2 in his face. "You won't let me run your credit," he said with stunned incredulity. And then he started calling out to the other salesman. "He won't let me run his credit. Can you believe that?" The other salesmen all shared his shock like I was committing some unforgivable insult by not letting him run my credit. Next thing I know, I'm being herded into a manager's office where he starts giving me the spiel about how I clearly don't appreciate how much they're trying to help me out. "But I don't want the car," I said. He continued on like I said nothing, telling me how they're trying to help me out and how I don't realize what a great deal they can make me. I finally had enough, so I said, "Listen, I'm not buying that car from you, and at this point there's nothing you could say or do to get me to buy any car from you, so give me back the keys so I can go somewhere else." And then he actually said to me, "I'll give you the keys back when I'm ready." He realized almost immediately that he had screwed up though, because as soon as he said it, he got up and went and got my keys. At that point, I was so enraged that I probably would have punched him if he hadn't got up to get them immediately. I drove off and never went back. In short, went used car shopping, and used car salesmen tried to bully and intimidate me into buying a car that I didn't want and couldn't afford anyway.
I went with my wife to buy a car. The salesman said that another couple were also looking to buy it, but he'd prefer us to have it because they were homosexuals. He even said, "homosexuals," in that stereotypical gay voice and went limp-wristed. I hope those guys are happy with their car. I hope those guys bought a car somewhere else. The narrator also hopes that that awful man didn't get any money from anyone, especially the people he was slandering in his place of work, and that the people he said it to complained to his manager. Although, as we've established, his boss probably would have laughed and high-fived him. If you're one of the non-reprehensible car salesmen of the world, the narrator apologizes for his slander. Your place of work just seems to come up with so many of these stories. Went to look at a car. Salespeople saw me and went into the office, an interesting tactic since they normally come out and ask if they can help. So I open up and look inside, look for rust in the usual spots like under the wheel arches, look at the color of the exhaust, and inspect the window rubbers, which looked to be a bit dodgy, and then I lie down to get a good look underneath. It's used, so I wanted to see if there was oil leaking from the front or rear. When the guy finally walks up to me and asks if he can call me an ambulance, he made some snarky comment about me lying on the ground. At this point, I was put off, but they'd made me wait about 20 minutes before coming out, so I took it for a test drive. When the guy gave me the sales spiel on the car, there were 3 main points on the car. We were driving and he gets a phone call. He didn't notice I saw the screen that said office phone when it rang, and he proceeds to talk as if he's talking to a customer who's coming to buy the car in 15 minutes' time. He repeats the 3 sales items and then carries on talking as if the guy is very keen. They're so obvious. I hate dealing with used car salesmen. An ADT security salesman at my door. I was actually contemplating it, but said I'd take the info and talk to my wife. Do you have to get her permission for everything? I paused and went wide-eyed and then said, I talked to my wife about financial decisions. Get the frick off my property. I had a phone salesman call me up and try to get me to extend my phone plan. If you sign up now, you also get a laptop. What kind of laptop? It's red. I had a car salesman tell me, debt is a good thing. It'll teach you how to manage your money. When I objected to $3,000 worth of upgrades. I asked him if this was what he told all of his 22-year-old female clients or if I was just special. He declined to answer. Looking at a wedding venue. It was lovely, the sort of place we were looking to get wed, and the price was okay. But the saleswoman just did a bad job. This is where you and your groomsmen can hang out before the wedding. It's our man cave. He'll be kept out of the way in the man cave. You can have beers with your boys in the man cave. Beers with the boys. She just kept dropping these phrases in. They were a bit stupid to start with, but it was nothing but offensive and grating by the end. It totally turned me off the whole place, and my now wife agreed with me. It felt patronizing, artificial, and just lazy. At a Honda dealership when I had to ask for the keys to my car back for the 3rd time. I only started cursing when I asked the 4th time. Yes, the deal he offered me was great. Even looking back, I was probably foolish for walking away from it, but I told him the moment I met him and reiterated several times that I wouldn't be making a purchase that day. I foolishly handed over my keys so that they could do an appraisal on my current car, which I knew they'd only give me $500 for. I knew that going in there, no matter what I did, I was going to go home and think about it overnight. I bought a Toyota down the street 2 days later. For me, it wasn't the salesman, but the financing guy. I was out car shopping and found one I liked at the first place I went. But of course, I wanted to check out a couple of other places. They were pushing an interest financing thing. I wasn't planning on doing financing at all, but for 0 interest, I could just let my salesman get that and then just pay it all off a week later. So the salesman suggested I just chat with the finance guy before I left. That guy was a fricking member. Acted like I was some huge jerk for wanting to actually look into more than one car before making a big purchase like that, and just wouldn't stop. I generally try not to be rude to people who are just trying to do their jobs, but I had to leave his office while he was talking because he would not stop. Told the salesman on the way out that if I didn't come back, finance jerk was why. I was looking to buy solar panels for my house. I got one consultation from a really nice sales lady who was very friendly, but completely knew her stuff inside and out. She had done her research, had printouts of my house's roof from Google Earth, showed me how many panels they'd lay out, among other things. I told her I was going to get a few other quotes, and she said it was perfectly fine, please just let her know what I decided. So I called around and set up 3 other quotes. First 2 were fine, just more expensive or not as good terms overall. The 3rd place, though,
Virango Solar. Yikes. I got a call from their sales guy who refused to come to the property, said he could do it all from the office. So he looks at the roof printout and tells me that he can offer about 2/3 of the panels as the other companies did, and I asked why, and he says, basically, because. So I say 3 other companies are offering between 17 to 18 panels, whereas he's only going to do 13. He claims they're wrong and gives me some nonsense reasoning. I say, okay, well at least they're cheap. So I tell him thanks, I'm going to go cover all of my options and I'd call him in a few days. I got calls from him every day for the next 3 days. After 2 days of still thinking, he comes back to me and says he's figured out how the other companies got more panels on the roof. They rotated them differently. Go fricking figure. On the 3rd day, I said I wasn't interested, thank you. So I got a call that same day from his manager asking why I wasn't interested. I told him that even though they were the cheapest, their inept sales attitude and extremely pushy manner from every person I'd talked to there made me never want to do business with them ever. He tried to talk me out of my fricking opinion, and I calmly told him to never fricking call back again, please, and hung up. Meanwhile, the nice lady at the other company, now Sunrun, hadn't bothered me once. I called her and said let's do it, and I haven't regretted it one day since. She worked her butt off to get me a very close price to the cheapest option, even after I told her I was going with her company. It ended up only being like $300 more than Virango Solar. How did you hack the system and get a good grade for no effort? Oh, let me tell you the tale of my grammatically challenged roommate at the time. We were instructed to write a how-to paper for sophomore English class. We had to pick our topics during class and tell the teacher. Someone sitting close to us came up with the topic of how to write an A paper, so naturally my friend goes with how to write an F paper. His intentions were to write it as best as he could and receive an A. He wrote it so poorly and with multiple spelling and grammatical errors that the teacher, quote, loved the satirical vibe that he'd demonstrated in his paper and promptly gave him an A. In first year university, I wrote a paper in a sociology class where I mixed up the word mores, a type of social norm, and moray, a type of eel, and as such wrote about the impact of eels on law. For some reason, the teacher's assistant thought that my eel law paper wasn't too horrible and gave me a B. She told the entire class that someone wrote about social eels and that we needed to be more careful with our spelling, though. I had a college professor where I just didn't turn in my final and he gave me an A for the class anyways. Not sure why. I gave him some duck jerky earlier in the year, so maybe he really liked that. Wow, I guess duck jerky is what the kids are saying now. What has the world come to? I mean, that guy was 100% sure he had lost your exam. He probably thought he lost it and didn't want to deal with it, so he gave you an A. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I left one high school shortly after semester break, and all teachers gave me an A because they didn't have anything to go on. Went to another state, and they were so far into the semester that all the teachers decided that they couldn't hold me responsible for what they already taught, so they all gave me whatever grade I came in with. The only time in my life I got all A's. Turned in the same essay twice and got 2 different grades. I did the same with a sculpture. He went on and on about the clear improvements in craftsmanship since last week. I smiled and nodded. I had that with an old boss. She'd never signed the first or second document I bought her, so I'd prepare the one I wanted signed and a backup. I'd give her the real one, wait for her to check it back, give her the dummy one, she'd kick it back, and then I'd resubmit the initial one unchanged and she'd sign it. God, she was awful. Part of me would love to see these professors and bosses brought to task for their clearly moronic practices and habits that, if followed, are just going to create more work when they clearly aren't checking properly to begin with. But on the other hand, unless you get the rest of the workplace or classmates involved to all go at once, all you're doing is making things difficult for yourself when they get a reprimand and treat you like crap for the rest of your time there. My senior year of high school, I was taking Spanish 12, or the senior level course. I'd been taking yearly Spanish courses since 7th grade at this point, so you'd think I'd be bueno by now. But no. No, I was not bueno. For our final presentation, we had to discuss any topic we wanted for a full 15 minutes. Obviously, all in Spanish. I knew I'd struggle, but I tried all year to actually improve, and I did not. Anyway, I did my presentation on the Oregon Trail computer game. You remember that? It was awesome. I played through and grabbed screenshots of different stages. I named my players after my friends in class.
I went the full nueve, you could say. One flaw, I didn't have the vocabulary for a 15-minute speech on my game, so I tried to cheat. Each slide was well done, but what I said was the exact same with small changes. Mi familia es, and then a verb. I even wrote note cards and hid them in my crotch while I sat and pretended they were hidden. I read off them because remembering like 8 verbs was beyond me. Mucho trabajo. I ended up with a grade that would allow me to pass and leave language courses the rest of the year. My teacher knew I was an idiot and gave me a slide, I'm convinced. So I thought I could do the same next semester and signed up for Spanish 13. Easy college credit, I thought. I walked in, same teacher. She took one look at me and wrote a pass to my counselor. You aren't taking this, butt leak. Go find a business course or something. So I did. Now I have a marketing degree that I don't use. Life is crazy, man. I had a bit of a weird teacher in geography way back when I was in the 9th grade. He was always correcting our assignments way too long after we handed them in. One time we had 2 assignments that should have been handed in over the course of 2 weeks. I only did one of them as I didn't really feel like doing the other one for some reason. When we got the assignments back like a month later or something, he didn't actually hand them back out to us, he just told us our grades from a piece of paper he was reading from. When he got to my desk, he gave me a B for the first one and an A for the one I didn't hand in. I don't think I deserved that. English 101. I forgot that an essay was due that following afternoon, but I had to work and study for a more important chemistry course. Downloaded the smallest JPEG I could find, converted it into a PDF, and submitted this essay in the hopes that my professor would ask me to send it again and it would give me a buffer time of 24 to 48 hours. I checked the grade module and I got full points. No questions asked. I took biology and economics my freshman year of college, and I made the mistake of doing both classes in the morning. I worked a graveyard shift. The biology class was graded solely on 3 exams. The dates for them were in the syllabus, along with a summary of chapters covered in each. I only showed up on the first day and 3 exam days, crammed the night before, and did really well on the tests. Got an A. Economics was harder. Participation and attendance counted towards the grade, and a test date was moved, so I missed taking it. Fortunately, I had a buddy in the class who signed my name on the attendance sheet that day, and therefore I was able to convince my professor that he must have lost my exam. He let me retake it, and I eked out a B. The professor definitely knew something wasn't right. He repeated several times that he had never lost a student's work before, and wondered aloud why it was only mine. Generally, assignments are all kept together. To my credit, I did get defensive, and retaking the test was his suggestion, not mine. One other factor that might have played into things was the fact that this was a community college, not exactly the land of the academically upwardly mobile. Within the first couple of weeks of every term, half the class would stop showing up altogether and never be heard from again. I think he was just psyched that I gave enough of a crap to fight for a grade in his class. I once spent a full 2-hour period of a 9th grade class copying the questions slowly into another sheet of paper. It was a reading retention quiz or something. I guess she was only looking to see if you had written anything because I got full marks. The moral is, teachers are overworked and underpaid, and children's educations pay the price. Yes, that is also an important thing to consider here. Your takeaway from this video should not be all teachers are bad and lazy. Most of these individuals are probably struggling to do their enormous workloads and screw up the kids as little as possible while barely making ends meet, and they likely cut corners to try and make it work. Most, but not all, teachers deserve way more than they get. Sophomore year of college, I was taking a class that, about 2/3 of the way through the year, I totally checked out of. Rarely went to class, hardly ever paid attention when I did, just stopped caring. Leading up to the final, I of course now realized I knew none of the material. The final wasn't cumulative. I did the math and realized that I needed a 50% to pass the class with a C-. I showed up the day of the exam and realized I got the day wrong. My exam was the previous day. I emailed my professor in a panic and begged her for a chance to retake it or do some kind of extra credit, anything to get me a passing grade. No response. I go home for winter break assuming I'm going to have to retake the class. I haven't told my parents out of shame. Then 2 weeks later, my teacher finally replies. Her email went something like this. I'm so incredibly sorry, Paula. I left for vacation immediately after the exam and just now got back. It's obviously way too late for you to take the exam or do any kind of extra credit. The best I can do is take your current class average, an 89, and put that in for your exam grade. Would that be okay? So I get a B+ instead of the C- I was hoping for?
Yes, that would be just fine, thank you. This is from college. It happened very recently. I take programming classes, and our mid-exam was to complete pre-written codes. The purpose of the code was to assign characteristics to a rocket. When the required characteristics are filled, the rocket will launch, and the completion status must be 100% for this to happen. If the completion status goes below 90%, the rocket won't launch. You get the idea. I was never good at programming. I understood the logic, but writing the codes down is like writing in an alien language. The exam was 2 hours, and in the span of 2 hours, my completion status was a mere 20%. My friends got 65, 80%, and even one was smart enough to change the pre-written codes and got 100%. I accepted the fact that I might fail this class, and I submitted my exam. I don't know exactly how the gods work up there, but I got a 95 on my mid-exam. Yes, 95. What the frick? I emailed the lecturer asking how I got such a score, and he said though I didn't get 100%, I implemented polymorphism into the codes, and he thought that was impressive. To this day, I still don't know what the frick polymorphism is, and how in the world I could have implemented it in my program. University, I had an 8 a.m. class that I would probably skip 1/3 of the time. I missed the day the midterm was given back, so I asked the professor to bring it to the next class. He starts to give me a hard time before looking at the exam and seeing the 100% written at the top and saying, "Good job." I go sit down, feeling pretty smart, and then go to glance through it before the class begins. For the main question, I see a couple of check marks, then triple question marks, nothing else for a page and a half, before the answer was circled with a check mark. Turns out I'd done the problem a wrong way, confused the teacher's assistant marking the test, and then somehow came to the correct answer at the end, so he just marked it completely correct. I had an essay that was explicitly due Tuesday in the 6th grade. I have no clue why it didn't click that it was due, not due, and only realized when my friends asked me about the essay on the bus. I told my teacher that I'd forgotten to print it out, ran home after the bus, typed it out in 15 to 30 minutes, and got a 97. This sadly started my habit of intense procrastination.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Picked a choice book. Had to do a project on it for Honours English class. Didn't read it, mildly researched the book. Crapped out a pretty-looking PowerPoint, presented my fancy bullcrap book report in front of class and the teacher. Got an A-. In Year 9, or US Grade 8 history, we were given a small assignment as homework over the weekend. I can't remember what it was on, probably the Tudors or something, but it had to be about 500 words and summarize what we'd been doing for the past few weeks. Nothing too hard. I completed the homework to what I considered to be a reasonable standard and handed it in. However, when I received the grade, I was awarded a D, with the teacher's primary criticism being that I hadn't written enough material. I was confused by this since I'd written around 500 words like he'd asked. He told me to go away and redo it better. After getting home, I had some time to compare my work with my friends. I'd written the essay in size 11 font Times New Roman, and I'd neglected to include any images. This is pretty standard for higher grade academic work, but most of my peers had used size 14. Some even used Comic Sans. So what did I do? I scaled up the text, increased the spacing, and slapped a couple of generic pictures of Henry VIII's face on there and handed it in the next morning. Lo and behold, after he graded it, I got an A and a special mention for my hard work. I've never been so thrilled with myself and so disappointed in a teacher in my life. It just goes to show how another person's laziness can screw you over. My teacher yelled at the class for 10 minutes telling us how stupid we were. Turns out I had a 98 and everyone had to rewrite it. I got 99 a second time because he didn't believe in 100s. That last teacher is an absolute dinosaur. Sure, for some subjects, I get that there's no such thing as an objectively perfect essay, but you need to have a standard for something done as well as it possibly can be in your field. Those stupid professors who refuse on principle to give out A+ are even worse. Alright, to flip our subject matter, here's a bunch of answers from the other side of the coin. People who put in a lot of hard work and got absolutely shafted by their teachers. In my college dynamics course, we had a group project that we assigned different sections to do within our group.
It was an incredibly difficult project, so we couldn't just completely split off and do it on our own, but there were 3 easier sections that could be done by one person. Anyways, in my group of 3, one of our guys just never showed up to any of our meetings. We're not jerks and we get that we're busy and all that, so we just give him the easiest stuff to do when he can get around to it. So my friend and I pull all-nighters until we finally complete it a few days before it was due. We send what we have to the 3rd guy and he assures us he'll get the rest done. We check up on him the day before, asking if he wants help, and he says that he's got it and he'll bring the completed project into class. Of course, he walks in and says, "Sorry guys, never got around to it." We're basically missing the easiest third of our project because he couldn't tell us he needed help. I explained the situation to the teacher, but he had no sympathy. He said, "In the real world, you live and die by the people at your side," and graded us for what we completed, so, surprise, we failed. I didn't talk to that kid for the rest of the semester, even though he sat right next to me. In high school, we were asked to write a proposal for a new drinking age in the United States. I wrote about how it should be lowered to 12, but people who are past 12 now should have to wait until their next birthday, as in to avoid millions of teenagers becoming suddenly legal age to drink at once. I cited other countries with lower drinking ages and fewer drinking-related issues, discussed how it currently has a strong forbidden fruit appeal to high school kids, and that wouldn't be as big a deal. Also, kids could get introduced to alcohol and learn their limits while still being somewhat supervised by their parents. She gave me a 0 and claimed I was making fun of the assignment. Apparently everyone else only lowered it to 18, citing if you can go to war you can drink a beer. Or they even raised it. I actually really enjoyed the assignment and thought I was being practical. Frick me, I guess. The qualifications to access university in Scotland are known as Highers. I took Higher English, but I'm kinda crap at English, but good enough to pass the exam. When our prelim, a sort of test, rolled around in February, I failed it by like 2%, and the teacher decided that I wasn't good enough to sit the higher exam. She'd keep me in the class, but when the exams came around, I'd sit the lower tier Intermediate 2 exam, which would give me a lower tier qualification which is useless for just about anything. I sat this exam and ended up getting an A. A useless frickin' A, which would be no help to getting me into any university, effectively wasting my whole year in that class. This was 13 years ago now, and I'm still annoyed. My film studies professor always stressed there are no wrong interpretations of a film, only different ones. She then proceeded to give me a 60% on an essay because, and I quote, "Your interpretation of The Wrestler is simply incorrect. That's not the message the movie was trying to send." This was 10 years ago in the Midwest US. I took biology as a freshman in high school. There was this big bug collecting project that counted for like 40% of our first semester grade. Basically, we had to catch a bunch of bugs, kill them, pin them, and correctly label them with their scientific name. To get full credit, you had to catch a minimum of 30 unique bug species. The one thing I learned from that project that I still remember, I'm terrible at catching bugs. If you count the cricket I bought at the pet store, I managed 18 and received a D+ on the project. So despite earning A's on all of the tests and homework that semester, I earned a B in the class. You were punished for your unwillingness to kill for your overlords. Bad surf. In 5th grade, I was really excited to be assigned our first report for homework. Something about having to research and write up a few pages on the topic that made me feel like I was finally entering big kid school. Anyways, we had the weekend to do it, and my topic was tornadoes. They were randomly assigned, but I was pretty stoked to get a cool one. I spent all weekend doing research and writing up this 4 to 5 page paper on tornadoes with a picture or two thrown in. But I was really proud of it. I got a D because my teacher assumed my parents had done it for me and wouldn't discuss the matter. It wasn't up for a debate in any way. I've never been so crushed. Really killed whatever love I had to learn that year. I still did well in school, but my enthusiasm about learning and doing research on my own was never the same after that. I was in an upper-level political science class that had essay tests. The professor asked us questions and wanted us to explain the answers. Not bad. So I filled in 5 out of the 8 pages in a blue book and turned in my exam, positive I'd aced it. I received a 63%, and when I asked the professor why, he said that although all of my answers were correct, other people had filled in 8 out of 8 pages, and he had to grade all of the tests relative to each other. Ugh. Quality, not quantity, should be the focus, surely. To a reasonable point. Surely, as a teacher, having shorter, better assignments is a plus, right? I'd want to encourage it.
let's get back to some grade hacks. Me and another guy I didn't know too well got assigned a joint presentation on a topic I can't quite remember. I think something to do with tourism in the outdoor industry. We did very little prep work after being assigned the task. Probably 80% of the PowerPoint was made in the hour right before the seminar. We rushed together about 10 slides with info copied from Wikipedia, decided which slides we'd each talk through, and left it at that. The presentation went pretty much flawlessly. We somehow managed to confidently blag our way through each slide as if we knew the topic by heart. When one of us would falter, the other one would jump in with some more bullcrap to cover. Come to the Q&A at the end, and we totally pulled it out of our butts to the point where the lecturer praised us for being so well prepared. I guess confidence is key. In the end, we got the equivalent of a B+. Definitely did not deserve that grade. I got the same grade as everyone else on a group project that crashed and burned spectacularly. I was the only person who did any work while the other eight members of the group messed around. The group agreed with me and signed a letter saying I deserved an A for the work I put in and they'd done nothing. The teacher agreed and gave me a better grade. I did my senior project on building a computer, like putting together a gaming rig from parts you'd buy on Newegg or Amazon. Since people think that's an impressive thing, I was able to get by with it no problem. The best part is that I'd already built it. I just assembled it, took pictures of myself putting it back together, talked about how to decide on what parts to get, the core components you need, among other things. I got a perfect grade. I had a Geology 101 class nicknamed Rocks for Jocks. The final was 5 to 7 p.m. on a Friday. We were warned that this was scheduled on day 1, there were to be no exceptions. All finals were to be done and grades to be in by midnight, so anyone graduating would know if they passed that night. During the semester, the professor had a breakdown at the beginning of class. He was using his own money to publish class notes on the web. The school would not compensate him. He then found out he was not only the lowest paid geology professor on campus, he found out he was the lowest paid teaching geologist, period. After his meltdown, he continued on, but his notes were no longer published. Everyone in the class got a B+. I asked people if they thought they should have gotten higher or lower, and nobody thought a B+ was right, but that's a grade most won't complain about. I doubt those finals were ever graded. Another slacker and I were assigned to make a poster on the socialism chapter in the Grapes of Wrath, include quotes and symbolism. We're both very bright, but even more lazy, so we kept putting it off until suddenly it was our turn to present. Thinking quickly, we had a palaver and agreed on a plan. It was a short chapter and he was a theatre kid, so he'd read the entire chapter out loud while I explained socialism as everyone doing their part and asked the whole class to come up and draw something on the whiteboard. So he got up front and he kicks a desk forward, stands on top of it and starts reading while I do my thing. By the end, the teacher was in tears and the smart kids that weren't slackers fumed because they knew what had really happened. But hey, extra credit! In short, spur-of-the-moment decision-making leads to extra credit for everyone else doing the work. Which franchise has betrayed their fans the hardest? God, anyone who's a fan of any Konami game has had it really hard. You love Metal Gear? We're firing the creator. That Silent Hill game we're making with Guillermo del Toro? Cancelled. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go and make pachinko machines out of your favorite video games instead of making actual video games. Cleveland Browns. Fire every head coach every 2 years except for the one who went 1-31. My name is Earl? Anyone? How the frick are you going to end on a crazy cliffhanger like that? The show was silly and all, but you got really attached to the characters and you hoped for the best for them. The creator of the show, Greg Garcia, did do an Ask Me Anything a while back and explained the cliffhanger and what the end of the show was supposed to be. Long story short, Earl, Junior's father, was going to be someone famous and that Earl wasn't going to finish the list, but instead he runs into someone doing their own list and finds out his list caused people to have their own lists. He then tears up his list and lives the rest of his life with good karma. In almost every fanfiction posted before 2010, you'll find a disclaimer that says something like, "I do not own the characters within, they belong to the author." I always thought that was so stupid, like, of course you don't own Spock. Apparently, people started doing that after the author of The Vampire Chronicles made threats of legal action against fanfiction authors who were creating not-for-profit works of fiction because they just loved the series. Fanfictions can be really long too, like almost as long as books or longer. I can't imagine working so hard on something you truly love
and then receiving notice that the creator wants to sue you because of it. People who live in the 48 states left on Sufjan Stevens promised to record an album for each state. Tool have said that their album is not far away for the last 5 years. This was written in 2017. Man, System of a Down fan here, I feel ya. There was a 90s computer-animated show called Reboot. The series had a good run, but a trilogy of movies ended on a cliffhanger. Reboot has since been rebooted. The trailer is bad. Very bad. So the narrator did like Reboot growing up and was completely unaware of this reboot of Reboot. Let me just say I have now watched the trailer and I'm just a little bit less happy about living on this planet than I already was. I don't see Spore written on here, but let me tell you that situation felt really crappy for me. Spore was a game that was meant to be sim life realized. Before the release, when we got those first videos of the microbial, sea life, and land life, simulator fans went nuts. This was our game. We're a niche of gamers that basically never gets catered to, and here came Maxis to deliver the sim game of the century. The fan page was literally filled with hypothetical species people were going to make, with whole textbook entries as to where and how this species lived. There were arboreal animals in trees, cave animals, deep-sea filter feeders, everything. And then Spore came out. The animal portion got dumbed down a whole lot. Basically, all animals behaved the same except some chewed on fruit and danced with other species, and some murdered and ate other species. You built creatures by digging up fossils and unlocking random bits. Yeah, and everything was bound to land pretty much and nested on the ground. No interesting life cycles or niches, just whacking things to death and dancing with the neighbors. The whole ocean part was just flat out removed, and if you dared venture into the water, you got chomped up by the fricking swamp creature's kaiju cousin. And all that innovative animal sim stuff was basically cut to make room for the most watered-down rip-off of other games imaginable. Watered-down crappy RTS, watered and double-watered-down crappy Civilization-style city stage, 2 unmemorable boring filler stages everyone hated to act as filler for the space age, which was just you floating around in a spaceship terraforming planets and making colonies so they could get attacked by pirates, and crap all so you could fight your way to the center of the galaxy and get a rod that lets you terraform a couple more planets for free? Some of the space stuff was sort of fun, but I would have happily cut all of it to keep the animal evolution and ecosystem sim and made that a complete game. Instead, we got an unmemorable disappointment that became the poster child for spreading your game too thin. And we've never seen anything like the original Spore promise. I'd say probably the Sonic fanbase feels the worst, given how many horrible Sonic games there have been. A Song of Ice and Fire series fans. We'll never get closure. Every time I see that Martin dude experiencing something that isn't writing, I taste true hatred. If we're on the subject of authors, then the 3rd book of the King Killer Chronicles from Patrick Rothfuss. He talks about how the first 3 are prequels, but it's taken him 15 years and we still don't have those, so… Fans of the sim games. Sim 4 has DLC for DLC. One of the DLCs for the DLC includes a much-loved feature from the base game of The Sims 3, Create a Style, that was stripped from the base game of Sims 4. Fans of Sherlock, the show, and they don't even know it. Season 4 was a burning dumpster fire. It's like they were writing fanfiction for the Mary Sueist Mary Sue. Fans of the show Dexter. I don't think I'll ever get over the cancellation of Silent Hills, especially since it's pretty clear to me that we'll never get another game in the series, and we'll probably never even get a decent HD release of the past games. X-Files fans. This last season was a joke. The finale had me livid. No wonder Gillian Anderson said she's done. Frick you, Chris Carter. As much as I would have loved to see some more well-done episodes, it just didn't happen. This thing needs to be put out to pasture. Having said that, if they did episodes with no overarching storyline, just all unconnected and basically random cases with no connection, and really explored some strange phenomena, would anyone else be interested? 'Cause I would. You know what? I'm gonna go with Bleach, the manga. I hadn't been into it too deep to care, but from what I've heard, the writer rushed the ending and stretched out the latter half for way too long, leaving a crap ton of characters' fates unanswered along with an equally crappy ton of plot holes. Futurama. I just want Fry and Seymour to finally both actually know what really happened. Philip J. Fry is a tragic character. Fans of The Walking Dead got done dirty. How I Met Your Mother fans stuck with it through a rough final season just to be given a gosh-awful finale that broke up Barney and Robin in all of 2 seconds after building their relationship for such a long time and returned Barney to his old self after so much development. Not to mention the dead mother in the show called How I Met Your Fricking Mother. I was actually on board with the final season by the end. Robin and Barney was meh, but by the end I bought them as a couple. Then the finale just completely undoes all of that because… I wasn't too upset by the mother's death, to be honest. It was a reminder that not everyone has a happy ending, but we should still enjoy it while we can. What annoyed me was the fact that they peed all over Ted's growth and finally realizing him and Robin were never meant to be and letting her go, by just bringing him straight back to where he started like he learned nothing over the course of the entire show. I mean, there was literally a scene of her floating away. How much more on the nose could they have gotten? Add into that the Barney and Robin stuff, and that finale was such a piece of garbage. The Kingkiller Chronicles. I don't want Rothfuss to force a book he doesn't feel is ready, but he was plugging the 10th anniversary edition of Book 1. You're going to charge people a lot of money for a fancy edition of a book in a series you won't even talk about completing anymore? Him and JRRM have put me off reading any unfinished series. Yeah. The narrator occasionally checks up on Rothfuss's Twitter to see where he is and sees him streaming video games or playing D&D or whatever, and it's like, I'm happy for you, but man, I would love that final book you're always saying you're working on sometime. Oh well. Half-Life fans. I've been doing this since Half-Life 1 was in magazines, and I was so excited by the sci-fi shooting game, I installed Steam before Half-Life 2 came out. I watched Gabe go from, we're moving to episodic content in order to release games quicker, to releasing 2 fantastic games relatively quickly, to quite possibly the most painful cliffhanger of my life. It's made worse by the fact that the end of episode 2 gives you a ton of hints and hooks about some of the prime mysteries in the world, in an astounding first for the entire series, and now we've been left hanging with absolutely no closure for about 10 years. It would be one thing if they said, officially it's not coming, but they haven't. Just an endless stream of no comments and we aren't discussing that at this time, breaking my heart more and more. I'm nearly 30 years old and I get way more bothered about this than I should, but I can almost trace a line directly back to that kid in elementary school salivating over a PC gamer, to the teen who rode his bike to 2 different EB games to get the G-Man box, then to that guy fresh out of school playing through episode 2, to the adult sitting here, medicated on green herb, typing about how badly he wants some real closure. Epistle 3 is almost closure, but real closure is we aren't making Half-Life 3, or Half-Life 3 releases on this date. Halo 5 no couch co-op? Come on. Honestly, 343 Industries ruined Halo. The franchise lost its touch, and with each new game it feels more and more like an average FPS. I can't believe Bungie would go give up Halo so they could work on that sweaty pile of crap that is the Destiny franchise. Honestly, I was still on board after Halo 4, even if I didn't like the new enemies very much, since I liked the story taking new, darker, and more narrative turns, including that one thing that happens at the end. Then Halo 5 comes out and retcons the tragic and meaningful ending of 4 within minutes, and had a plot that felt pointless. Not to mention that advertised the whole thing about Chief going rogue and Locke trying to take him down. Then in the actual game, it just turned out Locke was following him to find out what was happening, and was just confused the whole time. They have like a 5-second fight at one point, and even then it's just a misunderstanding. I would normally say Mass Effect, but the way EA has come at Star Wars, I'll go with that. Granted, Star Wars fans are the worst. We hate ourselves. A true fan hates all the movies. Thanks, guys. I hate you too. Arrow fans. 2 words. Felicity Smoke. Teen Titans.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Destiny, Bungie's fanbase. Coming from someone who has about 1,300 hours on Destiny 1 and still plays occasionally, Destiny 2 is a funless mess for me. Finished the campaign and played around 70 hours total, but I just can't find any incentives to keep me coming back to play. It makes me so sad to not enjoy it. Just look at the Destiny Reddit and it will show you how disappointed the fans are. It makes me really sad to see since I loved the series so much. The worst part is that Bungie isn't even listening to the players and are still doing what they want on their own time. A new update is supposed to come out and improve the game's basics and play speed, but I don't even think I'm going to bother trying it because it's not a big enough difference to keep me coming back. First Alien movie. Wow, that was good. Then Aliens. Okay, this was an 80s action flick, but still good. Alien 3? Wait. Alien 4? What? Prometheus. Oh, okay, new direction, I'm feeling it. And Alien Covenant. Ridley, stop, you have people who care about you. Berserk. No Man's Sky, at least just after its release. I was looking forward to the game and I enjoyed it when it came out. I was even a little surprised by the resounding disappointment surrounding the game at first. But you see, in the months leading up to its release, I watched all the gameplay videos with the volume muted. No commentary, no music, just video. I also hadn't seen the trailers and only watched them out of curiosity after the game was released. It was kind of like Sean Murray had studied all of the hype Peter Molyneux had built up for each game in the Fable trilogy, but then neglected the backlash. What do you think is going to happen when you build up hope for a hypothetical game but fail to deliver on any of your promises? A quick payday and a loss of trust from the community that hasn't been seen in the industry for years. So yeah, they betrayed the people they got excited for a game that they never planned to make. Luckily, they eventually redeemed themselves many years later by completely changing the game. I came here expecting to see someone else writing about Firefly, and I'm leaving disappointed. So many intriguing arcs were set up that could have been deeply developed, from what exactly they made River, to Inara's illness and relationship with Mal, and his emotional growth. Also, more of Book's backstory than was resolved in The Shepherd's Tale. I'm glad we at least got Serenity to tie up some loose ends, but I constantly rue that show getting cut short. A few come to mind, to be honest. Avatar: The Last Airbender with that crappy movie adaptation, Eragon with an arguably equally crappy, if not even more crappy movie adaptation, Chronicle, for those who know that movie, by Fox, ruining a pretty amazing sequel script, Martyr, leaked what would have been a pretty good sequel in my opinion, and in turn trying to turn the franchise into a paranormal activity like Cash Cow that ended up just tanking the franchise with no sequel release. And Halo fans with the garbage writing of the last two titles. This comment was written in 2017, and the narrator is laughing a little bit, because if what you were getting from Halo in 2017 was betrayal, what do you call that TV series from the last few years? Waiting until the grief at the betrayal had passed, turning up at your door in the middle of the night and then setting you on fire? Facebook. I'd definitely say that fans and supporters of it have been betrayed pretty badly, along with all other users. Half-Life fans. Seriously, it's like the fans did something to make Valve angry. The Miami Marlins. Fire sales after each of their World Series victories, then they fired Joe Giardi after he was named Manager of the Year and led them back to respectability in 2006. Then after the city builds them a new stadium, they go right back to giving away all their stars this past winter. Written in 2017. Steven Universe. Hey, wasn't that a fun year-long hiatus? Here, have 4 new episodes in 1 week before your next year-and-a-half hiatus begins. Don't worry, while you wait, you can still watch reruns of all your favorite episodes of Teen Titans Go, literally all day, every day, with a new episode each week. I'm thinking Star Wars fans. After the prequels, Disney takes over and throws their entire extended universe in the trash, then regurgitates the first movie again and follows it with a sequel designed to shake things up by destroying what's left of their dogma. Fans of the Game of Thrones books. I've accepted my fate. I can't really get into the show despite devouring the books, and it's been so long since I've devoured the books that I've lost interest. Gargoyles. Awesome, before-its-time cartoon on Disney in 1992. It still has some of the most dedicated and crapped-upon fans in 2018. We got 2 amazing seasons right out of Greg Weisman's beautiful head before they ripped him off the show and gave us nonsense in Season 3. Greg tried to continue with comics that are released so sporadically that Steven Universe would cry, and with art that fan artists would laugh off of DeviantArt. All the while, dedicated cons are going on with people who love the series, still screaming for good content. For 25 frickin' years. Greg has an Ask Greg website where he has almost admitted every plot point in the series, and it is stuff of a writer's nightmares. With each question, he oscillates between hopeful, coy answers, making us think that something might be in the works for us, to depressing tell-alls, knowing that he's screaming his story into the wind. The best continuation, in my opinion, is this behemoth of a fanfiction site that wrote novels on every facet of the story, from Wyvern Castle to Current Timeline to Time Dancer to 2148. Glorious fan art, enchanting OCs, true-to-character depictions. Sata is better than Katana any day of the week, almost forgives the fanfic washing over the Lexington being gay thing, but it too is consumed by the void. Every year there's a rumor of a live-action movie, but every year it's live-action disappointment. For 25 frickin' years. System of a Down fans. We waited when the hiatus happened, we waited when they wanted to tour a bit with the old stuff after the hiatus ended, we were told an album was in the works and patiently waited, and now Surge is like, meh, I don't like singing anymore. Frick, dude, let the other three move on if you don't want to do it. You let us down every time one of the others has to say, Surge is the holdup. More like System of a Letdown, am I right? Call of Duty fans. Modern Warfare 2 remaster without multiplayer? Really? Paragon got absolutely messed over by Epic Games. Paragon was going okay, they released a new update called the Monolith Update and it completely changed the game. No one liked it, but Epic Games continued to develop without listening to the Paragon community. One day they told us to all go try their new game, Fortnite. We all played it and they even gave everyone who paid for Paragon Founders Edition a free copy of the paid Fortnite mode. Then 2 months ago they announced the closing of Paragon due to it not being successful anymore. The game died because we helped them launch Fortnite and because they wouldn't listen to us when developing Paragon. They gave everyone a refund for their purchases, however, many people are having trouble getting their refunds. As an alternative to waiting for our refunds, we can immediately cash out in V-Bucks, fricking Fortnite currency. I am teed right the frick off and I'm out of this witch. Doctor Who. Stephen Moffat is the devil. Gamers. Companies think that they're doing a public service when they try to appeal to casual gamers, but this just creates vanilla games that flop because casual gamers never devote a substantial amount of time into any single game. Stop appealing to wider audiences and just make games gamers want to binge. I'm looking at you, Sea of Thieves. The narrator mostly agrees. That probably explains why almost all of his purchases end up being indie games these days. Time to go dip another few hundred hours into Stardew Valley. I loved SimCity growing up. I played 2000 all the time despite not understanding how zoning worked. Think about that. I'd play a game where I put down roads and police stations and schools, and didn't put down zones. That's crazy, but I loved the idea of building little working cities. As I got older, I moved to 3000, and I still consider it my favorite game of all time. I literally have the bound manual for 3000 on my nightstand right next to me now. I have some of the songs from the soundtrack on my phone because I like to listen to them when I ride the bus to work, because it reminds me that I live in a city just like the ones I used to build as a kid. The new SimCity was so misguided, I feel like I would have been less disappointed if they just rebooted it as a first-person shooter. Why is this always online? Oh, we need to offload the processing power to the internet to handle all the features. Like how everyone in your city is an independent person. Yeah, that's a lie. And we proved it was a lie within like 24 hours of release. This is just to avoid piracy, isn't it? No, there's also the multiplayer. I don't really want to play multiplayer. Can I be offline when I play alone? No, there's a commodities market that impacts everyone. You wouldn't want to miss out on that, right? It's just a laundry list of bad decisions. Small city sizes, just a real lack of humor in the writing. It just feels like a game made by people that didn't understand what made SimCity great. It was pretty, and you could simulate a city. That's basically all they got right. Good night, sweet news ticker. I hope we'll talk about broccoli and llamas again in another life. Matrix fans. They promised it would be a trilogy and then never delivered. On the other hand, I was a little afraid that the new movies might ruin the original, so in a way, I'm glad they never came out. Anything Michael Bay has made a movie out of, Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles especially. Seriously, the man seems to make a hobby out of taking a dump on my childhood memories. What made a job candidate go from your best to your worst choice?
Hiring a developer, I asked details about the languages he had on his resume. Oh, I don't actually know any of those, I put it on there to get an interview. The languages were obscure and had already passed the interview, and I was just genuinely curious how he had run into them. I walked him out immediately. He didn't get the job. I asked the applicant about their strengths, and they spoke about how result-focused they were. Going well so far, and then they started sharing examples of unethical things they did to get the job done, like bribing customers, sharing misleading information. Clearly, that was the end of that interview. My friend was doing first-round interviews and screening for a role when a guy from a dating app who had pumped, dumped, and ghosted just a few weeks earlier walked in from reception. Turns out he was using a fake name on his profile. She described it as an Abe Simpson moment where he walked through the door, had a sudden realization, did a 180 straight out the door without saying a single word. Well, at least he recognized her. It would be even worse if he had completely forgotten who she was. When I was becoming an assistant manager, I had to sit in on an interview. My boss took a look at the guy's resume and went into the usual line of questioning. At one point, he asked why the interviewee had left his previous job. The interviewee said he had quit. My boss then asked another series of questions which eventually caused this guy to slip up and say that he hadn't quit but rather he had been asked to leave. The interviewee got up and left once he realized he'd been caught in a lie. After he was gone, my boss turned to me and said something like, "You know, I saw the felony and alternative school and really wanted to give him a chance. He was doing fine until I caught him lying." Asked a warm-up question to an applicant and they went about it for 20 minutes without stopping or letting me interject to ask any of the main questions. At one point, I interrupted them and said something along the lines of, "Okay, that's great, let's move on to another topic," just to be told they weren't done. They hadn't gotten to the point yet, and then they proceeded to keep talking about the same thing for the remainder of the interview without me ever getting to ask any relevant questions. Ah yes, that valued skill that we all look out for in our hires, ignoring directives from above and steamrolling management when they try to put you back on task. I didn't think it was possible to try and filibuster in a job interview, but there you go. The candidate went on a 5-minute rant about his parents and how much he hated them. Not sure what set him off on that one, but crazy is not a good look. Good move. We had a guy in his 40s that we hired tell the room that he was going home to kill his parents because they decreased his allowance to $1,500 a month on top of paying his living expenses. The boss called the cops, the guy got pretty unruly, and the cops used their tasers. One day we were all talking about Walmart and this same guy asked what we were talking about. We thought he missed what store we were discussing, but it turns out he had no idea what a Walmart was. His parents were both successful surgeons or something like that, so he grew up extremely rich and didn't know about places like Walmart existing. I had an applicant tell me during the interview that her mother was outside and if she could now bring her mother in to chat some more. This applicant was interviewing for her first employment as a full medical doctor. I was going to mention something similar. I used to work at a place that was a bit far away and hard to find with little options for public transport. We were hiring for an entry-level position, so it wasn't rare that someone would show up with their mum or dad that drove them there for the interview and, having nowhere else to go, they'd be in the waiting room. That's understandable. One mum, though, did the speaking to the secretary herself, as in, "This is my daughter, we have an interview here today," and tried to enter the interview room herself and seemed annoyed that we asked her to wait outside. The girl herself wasn't bad, but since we had good options, we decided to go with someone a tad more independent. He spat into his hand and held it out for me to shake. What a rookie. He should know you're supposed to cut your palms and give a blood shake. We were interviewing for a comic shop sales position. This guy was going great. He has the vibe we like and he seems to really know his stuff. Then bam, he goes on a tangent about human puppers, puppy play, and the variations it can take. I'm not one to kink shame, but damn if that wasn't unprovoked. The panel asked him, "So, you put Industry 4.0 on your CV, so you have some knowledge about it."
Yes, I do.
"How do you think it could be applied here?" Cue 15 seconds of stupid face from the interviewee. So we ask again, "Where or how do you think it could be applied?" The interviewee starts spouting off some stuff about using CAD as if it was some amazing new thing. If you're going to put bullcrap on your CV, at least make sure you know something about the topic, like what it is for a start. I did some interviews for the help desk I worked at many years ago. It was some light technical questions followed by troubleshooting scenarios where you'd just walk us through how you'd solve a problem. One of the technical questions was, Give an example of a browser plugin. The candidate proceeded to explain that a browser plugin was something you plugged into your computer to either sit on the monitor, like a webcam, or help you with your browsing, like a mouse and keyboard. They also missed all of the other questions we asked. On the plus side, they were very confident in the answers they gave us. I'm a young female software engineer, and I was interviewing this old-school 90s movie-type programmer guy who knew COBOL really well. I usually ask a tough algorithms problem, and I didn't really expect him to do well, but I was preparing to make the argument that he has so much real-world experience and could add some diversity to our collective skill sets and culture, so we should consider hiring him anyway. I start with an easy version of the problem, and it's fine, he doesn't do great, but I expected that. Then I start explaining the harder version of the problem, but before I could finish, he says the problems are exactly the same. I'm a bit taken aback, but I try to explain how the problem is different, and then he just starts yelling at me as to why he thinks the problem is the same. I sat down from the whiteboard and processed what had just happened in silence for a few minutes. If I felt I had the authority to end it there, I would have, but I didn't, so I attempted to continue. I work up the courage to start speaking again to try to help him, and as soon as the first sound comes out of my mouth, he immediately starts aggressively talking over me more of why he thinks the problem is the same and asks in a very patronizing tone if I understand what he's saying. My boss gave me the authority to just end interviews in the future if they're being a jerk. The guy I interviewed was checking out my wife and asked whether she was single. This isn't my story, but I know of someone who was part of a committee hiring a new professor. At the final stage, they had 2 candidates they liked, so they took them both to dinner individually. Pretty standard in academia. The first guy did really well, but after the meal, he picked up his plate and started licking it. Licked it clean. The committee was pretty weirded and grossed out. The second guy also does well, but eventually he asks, "So, what's the university's policy on dating students?" The committee was like, "Well, I guess we're going with the plate licker." I was doing a basic boilerplate interview in 2009 for an entry-level position. Everything was going well until my last question. I tried to keep the last one kind of fun, but also try to get an idea of how they view money since their job is handling thousands of dollars a day in cash. So I asked them, if you had $1 million right now, what would you do with it? The normal and boring answer is to invest most of it and spend a little on stuff. This person's answer, well, it wasn't that. So I'd put about half away for my retirement, and the other half I'd invest into buying as many substances as I could so I could resell them. I have plenty of contacts, and the return on investment is pretty good if you buy bulk. Needless to say, that's a bit of a red flag. This is because people try and steal the daily deposit and buy and resell substances that night and then complete the deposit in the morning. It happens much more than you'd think. Assistant manager here. I was interviewing this one young man, and he was doing solid till he said, "Man, that coworker of yours, I want to knock boots with her." Much like a video I did recently where we talked about bad first dates, I feel like we should appreciate these really bad applicants for showing such obvious signs from the get-go, rather than waiting until they're hired before destroying your office from within. I don't know how we should reward them, but I've got to say they're more preferable. My first professional job was an HR manager at a small factory. I was interviewing an applicant for a job in our quality control unit. During the interview, his cell rings and he stops the interview and takes the call. He ends the call and then tells me he just got another job offer and accepted the position. He proceeds to tell me his buddy is in the lobby and would be perfect for the job he was interviewing for with us. He wanted to get him to take his spot at the interview. I couldn't believe what I'd just witnessed. I declined to interview his buddy as he had not applied for the job. Some people are unreal. I don't interview applicants myself, but for one job they'd interview 2 of us at the same time for the same position, which was worker at a gas station. They asked questions, and for one I could answer first and then he'll answer the next one first, and so on and so forth. It's my first job interview ever, as I'd just finished high school, and the guy I was up against was more qualified in every way. So one question was, what would you do if you'd found out that our station manager is stealing stuff from the station or selling them to put money in his pocket? I said I'd report him to his supervisor. This company has a chain of stations in the country, and for every region there is someone who supervises the specific region. The same way we workers answer to gas station manager, he has to answer to his regional supervisor. They explained this all when they introduced us and told us about the company. The other guy's answer to the question was, I'd blackmail the manager that if he doesn't include me, I'd report him. I'll finish with the fact that I was the one who actually got the job. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My department is a very male-dominated one, and I'm the only woman. I'm also the second stage of any interview to join us. It goes like the team leader talks to them, then I do, then the grand boss does. This one guy passed the section of the interviews conducted by men with flying colors. He then spent the entire section led by me staring at my chest. I was wearing a frickin' turtleneck. He was newly graduated, so we gave him some feedback about appropriate interview conduct, and then hired a different candidate. It was going well until she suddenly said, "I don't know why people think interviews are so hard. Like, all you have to do is be normal for 10 minutes, just don't talk about your downstairs herpes or whatever other transmissible disease you have." This was an interview for a residency position as a doctor. Not sure where she ended up, but it wasn't with us. An in-person interview for a copywriting position at a tech company. It went great until they asked me how much money I wanted. I'd never been in a position to negotiate before and was still fairly new to the industry. I had zero idea what my market value was, and they wouldn't give me a ballpark. I tried to play it off and say that I was more interested in the opportunity than the money, but they insisted that they needed a figure to work with and that they wanted to pay me fairly. I said some number that was in retrospect way too low, and the what the frick look on their faces just said it all. I could tell they weren't going to call me back after that. It would be like a software engineer sitting you down and telling you that $13 an hour sounds about right. You'd think something was seriously wrong with him or his work. My personal favorite, I said, "Can you tell me about a time you were faced with an irate or difficult customer?" The applicant told a story of working airport security. They encountered a traveler from the Middle East, there was a language barrier, a misunderstanding, and they tased the individual. Even the way they told the story couldn't make it sound like they were the one in the right. On top of that, they used racist language, including the N-word. Thank you for your time. About 20 years ago, I was working at a vocational school. New instructors were required to give a sample lecture as part of the interview process, and the other instructors would be the audience. We'd let them talk for a bit and then start interrupting with questions, easy ones at first and then getting harder until we decided they'd had enough. Usually they were judged not by their answers, but by how they handled the question. One day we had a guy who chose to lecture on computer hardware. He started off okay until the questions started. When my buddy reached into a box, pulled out a hard disk and said, "What's this?" and the guy couldn't answer, the interview ended soon after. This one guy complained about how there were too many poofters at his current job in retail. I asked him to repeat himself and he laughed and said, "Well, you know what they're like." You should have seen the look on his face when I told him I was gay and I didn't think he'd be a good fit for the company. It's been 10 years, but it's so depressing to think that people think exposing their prejudices at an interview will help them. He started talking about anger management issues. We try to support mental health as much as possible, so this isn't an automatic no. We asked him how he copes with this. He said he shuts down, becomes withdrawn, and may be rude to colleagues and customers. Yeah, that's a no from me. This lady took a pass at the boss's husband and then turned to her and said, "You did well." Obligatory, not me, but a friend. She was interviewing to work at an animal shelter and was told at the end of the interview she basically had the job. When she went back to her car, there were cops around it and all the employees were out in the parking lot panicking. She'd left her dog locked in the car in a hot day. She never heard back from that place. Oh my god, that's really unfortunate. Lesson learned, I hope? It's entirely possible that we can pin this down to stupidity rather than not caring about her dog, but even if she was the most angelic, perfect person in the world, she had to have looked at this situation and said, "Yeah, you know what, I can see why I didn't get this one." Basically, they said all the right stuff, but were taking a while to answer each question. Then I noticed them texting someone. Turns out they were asking a friend for all the answers. Immediately turned them down, but that's some serious stealth texting though. I was interviewing someone to replace me in a finance position. Things were going well until I gave her a scenario and asked her how she'd turned that profitable, to which she replied, "I think if we don't reach that stage, we'll be fine." This soon-to-be college grad had passed 2 phone screens and was in the office going through our panel interviews for a software position. One of my engineers who was scheduled to interview him next came to my office. The engineer had decided to take a deep dive through the candidate's GitHub repos, a software engineer's public portfolio for you non-techies, as the basis for questions. The candidate was a person of color, but some of his personal projects were littered with incredibly derogatory and inflammatory language. Like multiple variables were variations of the hard R N-word, as well as LGBT slurs. I stopped the interview right there, walked him out, and sincerely encouraged him to clean up his public repos before applying to any other companies. It sucked too, because we all liked him and he was technically capable, and it seemed like it was just a dumb college kid's mistake on personal projects that he thought no one would ever look at. However, we can't risk anything like that happening in any of our code, and you never know what underlying issues could have caused those inclusions that the candidate needs help for. Hopefully, it was a wake-up call for him. Hiring for a writer position in legal marketing, looking at law students who usually jump at the opportunity because it's remote, pays well for a student, and can be done on their own schedule. One candidate had some pretty decent experience in the field we were looking at, not a bad personality it seemed, and took a funny question in stride. Then, when he was asked about his writing experience, stated, "I'm not really a strong writer, I don't really like it." This was for a writer position. Doesn't like writing. Isn't good at writing. She seemed nice, and then she said, "One of my references is going to say really nice things about me, you'll see. She's my best friend, my high school guidance therapist." This lady was 24. Then she claimed she'd need a month off for her honeymoon. He hadn't proposed yet, but she's gone over to his house on the first date, so it's getting serious quickly. We respectfully didn't hire her. There was this one guy I liked, but my boss didn't. I would have hired him though. He said he was lazy, probably more lazy than anyone they'd ever met. But he was also driven and a bit of an expert in his area. This means, in his words, that he'll always find a way to do a task faster and with less effort, but with better results. I was interviewing a guy for an IT job at a healthcare-related company a few years ago. Things were going great until the end of the interview when he informed us that something was going to come up on his background check, so he was just going to come clean about it now. He proceeded to tell us that he was fired and prosecuted for stealing intellectual property and company confidential data. Needless to say, we didn't end up hiring him. Application was really good, phone interview was going well, open availability and eager to start. We used to ask, "Can you pass a substance test and a background check?" It's not a question we ask anymore, but one applicant back in the day responded with, "Due to some questionable life choices over the weekend, I won't be able to pass either for the foreseeable future." This phone interview happened on a Wednesday. Happened about a year ago when I was 21 trying to grow a telemarketing team for a tech startup, mostly interviewing people around my age, maybe a few who were a couple of years older. But then I interview a man who was over double my age, and the whole interview was him trying to ask me questions about my role, my experience, and my age. I understand it was probably a shock for him to be interviewed by someone so young, but it was even more off-putting for me. He didn't really fit with the vision of our team, but we did have another position we looked to put him in, but that position was then filled by someone else as well. I interviewed for a job and it went well. Well, up to the point where I asked about the hours. The interviewer said that they started at 8:30, but most people were in the office by 8. He tried to make out that this was a good thing as they had a committed team. I was offered the job, but I turned it down because screw that. If they pay me for the hours I work, I'll work hard, but if they're going to try to squeeze extra from me right from the start, then screw them. Every retail job I had as a teenager was like this. Work starts at 5, but you have to be there by 4:30 so you can be on the floor at 4:45. But don't clock in until 5. Don't stand around waiting to clock in either. You have to be working. Work ends at 11 p.m., but you have to sit there for no reason until the cashiers cash out, and we all leave as a group for no reason. It takes about an hour. I didn't stay there long. I tell every young person I know to tell the boss they won't be taken advantage of like that and to quit on the spot. Learn to stand up to that crap when you're a kid and you can afford to quit. From some of my experience, I've learned don't make jokes. You can try to make something funny that's already happened, but don't go stand-up comedy mode. You'll probably flop. I can tell a story from my mum, who in her career did some interviews. Everything went well until the interviewed person repeatedly said the word internship wrong while applying for an internship. At first, she thought that person just made a mistake, but then she began to realize that he genuinely didn't know what an internship was. Okay, English isn't my first language and I don't know how you could say internship wrong, but in my language it's practicum, and the person said praxis. These words don't really sound the same, but come from the same family. In the police, we had one applicant who did well during the fitness test and the interview board. Prior military and a 4-year degree as well. We put him at the top of the list and was slotted for the next academy. During the polygraph, he lied about the animal mistreatment questions. When we asked him about a possible error, he told us that he used to have, relations with his female German Shepherd. He was not hired for obvious reasons. What event caused a real-life butterfly effect for you? My mother wore heels to work and slipped on the carpeted steps, resulting in a broken high heel and a broken leg. While she was home recovering, she somehow developed allergies that led to her needing an inhaler to dose herself with penicillin. The inhaler interfered with her birth control, and now I have a brother 13 years younger than me. Nearly every single friend I have in college is because one day in my Gen Ed health class, we had to pick a seat that would become our seat for the semester. When I came in, there weren't many seats left, and the people I sat next to ended up becoming my best friends and introduced me to all of my other friends in one way or another. I'm alive because my aunt was born. My grandfather was conscripted into the Romanian army as a medic, and his unit was one of the many acting as a defensive barrier covering the German supply lines to Stalingrad. My aunt was born and he was called back to Bucharest from the front. While he was on leave, the Russians launched Operation Uranus, which decimated the Axis forces. He received word that his unit had been completely destroyed. He was never reassigned, and in 1948, my mother was born. I'm also alive because a bunch of Romanian cows got sick. My other grandfather was a pharmacist, back when that meant actually making medicines, and he was also Jewish. The town he lived in was largely agrarian, and their cow herds came down with some illness that was killing them. He whipped up something that cured them. The townspeople were very grateful to him. So grateful that when the chief of police heard that the Germans were coming to town to take inventory of who lived there, he came to my grandfather's house with some train tickets for him and his wife. They escaped the Third Reich and never got caught. My father was born at the end of 1945. Actually, you know what? I guess this is the opposite of the butterfly effect. Rather than one small action blowing up into a much more important chain of events, two hugely improbable events eventually led to my birth and obviously my extended family as well. And now, well, I work running ads on the internet. I was going out to grab pizza and a case of beer for me and my roommate, but he texted me that he had a stomach thing, so I walked to a restaurant and ordered dinner at the bar and met a girl there. And now we're married and have 2 kids because my roommate had diarrhea. I can totally see a child telling the short version of this story to someone who doesn't really care, but the kid just hears it and repeats, "My dad married my mom because his roommate has diarrhea." That is clearly the best and only way to describe how they met. Children are the best at getting to the heart of these sorts of things. If only the best man at their wedding had given that specific speech. So my then girlfriend, now wife, were planning on going away traveling for a very long time. Several years, in fact. The night before we left, I was just packing my things, and at the last minute I decided to include some camera stuff. I had an SLR that I didn't really use too much. I very nearly didn't bring it because it was big and space was at a premium. While we were away, one of the things that we did was work in a wildlife rehab center. At the time we were there, it was very quiet, very few baby kangaroos to look after. But we had to be ready as that could change in an instant. Like, in one day, 3 could come in and boom, full-time job. I used my spare time to really get to grips with the camera and learn about photography in general. Now, I'm a wildlife cameraman. Had I decided to leave my camera, I'd never be doing what I'm doing, which is sitting in a freezing cold shed for hours at a time, waiting for some animals to do something that they're not doing. High school. I didn't get into the advanced placement history class I wanted, changed up my schedule, including a different gym class without everyone I knew. I was heartbroken. I really wanted to teach, and without an AP class senior year, I was screwed. I made a new friend in gym class who was wearing a volunteer firefighter shirt. He had just joined. Seemed interesting and he invited me to check it out. They paid for me to get my EMT. I fell in love with healthcare. Fast forward quite a bit and I'm an ER nurse and precept students and new nurses, teaching them how to survive in the ER. I also do public outreach and injury prevention, and I love it. I'm glad I missed out on my AP history class. If my biological mum hadn't asked her parents to watch me for a couple of hours and then left town, I wouldn't have had the incredible and privileged life that I was given through adoption. My younger half-brothers were raised by our biological mum and they're a total frickin' mess. I'm more of a mum to them than their actual mum, and I would have been an absolute wreck as well if she'd kept me. Instead, I was given an amazing private education, all the sports and musical adventures, and most importantly, a healthy, loving home with 2 parents who taught me that just because you share blood doesn't mean you share love, and just because you didn't give birth to a child doesn't mean you can't be their parent. The wife and I were having dinner in Hawaii one night on vacation. As we were getting up to leave, I noticed she hadn't finished her beer. I told her she should finish the beer since we paid some ridiculous price for it. Fast forward 30 seconds and we leave the restaurant and we're walking the 3 blocks back to the hotel. About 50 feet in front of us as we're walking down the sidewalk on the left side of the road, a car comes flying out of a side street from the right and crashes through the street, hops the sidewalk in front of us and smashes into a wall. If she didn't finish her beer, we would have been smoked by the car and most likely squished between the car and the wall. We always finish our beer now. If you hadn't drank at all, you could have had an action movie scene with a car crashing behind you as you casually walked down the street. I mean, it's only cool if the car explodes afterwards. I was walking to school and got distracted by a hedgehog that ran into a bush next to me, and then a big tree branch fell in front of me and would have crushed me if I didn't get distracted by that spiky little mouse scurrying into the bushes. I gave him a dead cricket the next day and he took it and ran off. Godspeed, spiky mouse. At the end of 6th grade, my class took a field trip on whale watch. That night I saw a commercial for a documentary TV series on whales. Ever since that day, I wanted to grow up and protect whales from being hunted. Today, I work in the military specializing in marine preservation. Cool. I didn't even know the military worked in marine preservation. My brother spent a career as a Navy corpsman, a medic, and for 23 years of his life, he was trying to preserve Marines from their own stupidity. Everything from bullet wounds and major contusions to heart attacks to venereal disease. As it was with the Marines, I suspect there were a few cases of crayon poisoning and more than one marble up the nose too. The Navy definitely invests in marine preservation. Getting my ears pierced the day after I graduated high school got me where I am today. I worked at McDonald's at the time and was scheduled to work that night. Before my shift, my girlfriend at the time convinced me to get my ears pierced. Well, when I showed up to my shift with those clear ear studs in, my manager gave me an option: either take them out or go home. Being only 17 and not taking anything seriously, I went home. On the way home, I called that girlfriend's dad and asked if I could work with him laying tile. He gave me a chance, and I quit McDonald's that day. Worked with him for about a year until the 2008-09 recession caused us to run out of work. I got laid off. 4 months later, I landed a job in a new hospital doing admitting in the emergency room. Did that for 2 years before I got my phlebotomy certification. Been doing that for a few years and now I'm in my final semester of nursing school. I attribute everything I've done to that day my ex-girlfriend pressured me into getting my ears pierced. Who knows how long I would have stayed at McDonald's. Received an incredibly high-paying job offer to run our biggest competitor's team. I told my boss, even though I loved my job, but it was more than double what I was making. My boss agreed to a reasonable raise, still nowhere near the offer. I decided to stay because I genuinely loved my team and co-workers, and the money wasn't enough to leave that happy place. In exchange, I had to take up another account that meant a business trip I didn't have in the plans. I went on that trip and met my future husband. A couple of years later, we went on our honeymoon at a new resort in St. Lucia. Ran into someone I knew from home and work. Turns out, the team that I'd been given the job offer for had made so much money that they'd booked the same resort to celebrate. I sat there and went, wow, life is nuts. I would have ended up there either way. Well, this might be the opposite of what we were asking here, as apparently no matter if you're chosen to quit both jobs and throw your life into turmoil, you were destined to meet your partner and be in that exact resort at the exact same time. Sweet though. In short, I was just out of high school and new in town with no job. I was living off what savings I had left, and my account went below zero without me knowing. I was overdraft charged like 10 times and I owed $300. I went down to the bank and spoke with a teller, and she ended up being a lifesaver. She worked with me and got all the charges removed. On top of getting the charges removed, we got to talking about my situation, and she said that her son worked at a local restaurant and she had helped me get a job. She was a woman of her word, and by the end of the week I was working full-time. Fast forward, I met a cool dude who worked there, we became friends. I introduced him to my sister, they fell in love, got married, and had 2 kids. His best friend came into town for the wedding, and I introduced him to my roommate at the time. They fell in love, got married, and had 2 babies. I also got my best friend a job at the restaurant where he met a girl working there. They fell in love, got married, and had a kid. Right before I left, I got my roommate a job at the restaurant where he met a customer, fell in love, got married, and had a kid. As a bonus, my best friend, who I helped get the job, repaid the favor and got me a job at a different restaurant where I met a girl, fell in love, and got married. In short, I overdrafted and caused 5 marriages and 6 babies. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Went to a soccer match on a Thursday night in August 2010, after years of turning down invites from multiple groups of friends. But this time it was for someone's birthday and they gave me a ticket, so I said, what the hell, okay. I fell in love with my local team. I'd watched soccer in high school and college and of course the World Cup, but this was different. I rekindled friendships from years before through our mutual support of said team. Made new friends, experienced new things because of friends and the team, drank more than I usually did. In January 2016, I got laid off from a job I'd grown to hate after 8 years and a lot of rounds of layabouts, just waiting for my number to be called. That March, I was getting antsy and bored at home because I was trying to save money while still looking for work, and decided to get off my couch and go to an off-season supporters group meeting, which I usually don't like to do because I'm not good at social skills, and if I hadn't been unemployed, I know I wouldn't have gone. But that night I met the woman I instantly knew I was going to fall in love with. I got a new job, quit drinking, finally went on a date with her 6 months after meeting her, figured out I hated the new job, quit said job, moved to her city 35 minutes south in 2017, and have been working odd jobs part-time and doing gig economy stuff. I moved in 6 months later. We had a puppy magically fall into our lives within 3 days of just talking about maybe getting a dog, and it's my first dog ever and I'm so happy about it. Got engaged, got married in December, and I'm so happy. We also just got a kitten. I don't know if this counts, but during the Sri Lankan Civil War, my dad and his family were chased out of their home and were forced to seek shelter at his cousin's house a couple of towns over. His cousins only had one neighbor, and that neighbor was my mum and her family. They used to meet up at the fence dividing their lawns and talk for months. One of the pictures from their wedding was them at that fence. When I was 18, I had a girlfriend, and her older brother owned a small company. He said to me, "You know, I think you'd be pretty good at this job. I'm 34 now and have a legitimate career that I love because I dated a girl for a bit. I also had a cat for the better part of that time period because of the girlfriend. I'm a cat person now." This happened 2 days ago. It was early in the morning, and as I was about to leave for work, my mum reminded me that I forgot my water bottle on the table while I was walking out. For whatever reason, I decided to go back, leave my backpack in the car, and then walk back into the house for the water bottle. Well, that took about maybe 10 seconds total. It started to rain heavily on my way to work, and I couldn't see very well. But I noticed the brake lights of the cars ahead stopping suddenly and some moving off onto the shoulder, and decided to slow down and put the hazard lights on for the people behind to slow down. Well, turns out everyone was braking because a 4 or 5 car accident had just happened seconds before. All the cars were scattered across the highway, spread across the left and right shoulders, and another had hit the crash barrier. Basically a total mess. The drivers were still in their cars, I guess processing what had just happened. After seeing it, I immediately started to think that if I hadn't gone back for the water bottle, there's a chance I could have easily been in that accident, or at least even closer to it. It tripped me out for the rest of the day. The crazy thing about random variables is had you actually been at the point where the accident occurred, you might have been the one element that stopped it, or at least saved someone from a wreck. Maybe you're more attentive than the other drivers and gave enough warning? I guess we'll never know, and really, I blame that accident on your water bottle. Almost everything that's happened in my life for the past 8 years is a direct result of me literally flipping a coin to decide between 2 colleges. I play the sport I do, have the friends I do, and am dating the person I am and very nearly every other aspect of my life because a nickel landed on heads. Alright there, Harvey Dent. I should say to everyone watching, please don't make every choice in your life based on random chance. Only resort to it like this if the 2 colleges are completely, absolutely equally appealing to you. Then, after the proper research and forethought, why the heck not flip a coin, I guess. I procrastinated one day in high school by watching a foreign musical on YouTube. I ended up trying to learn the lyrics and eventually the language. That led to me discovering the field of linguistics, which I'm now majoring in. I don't know what I'd be doing now had I actually started doing my homework that day instead. Just last month, a friend of mine told me a story from his recent heartbreak. He, let's call him Mickey, had been with this girl Minnie for almost 4 years when, out of nowhere, she told him she was leaving him and moving out. He had no idea the relationship was in jeopardy, but she dipped. Anyway, a few weeks went by. Mickey was hanging out with a coworker of his who he had just recently met and ends up back at his place just to hang out. On the fridge, he sees a note in Minnie's handwriting. The note detailed several issues in Mickey and Minnie's relationship, and so Mickey asks his new friend where he found this note. Turns out this new buddy had gone to the same music festival as Mickey and Minnie a few months prior. The friend had found the note on the ground on the parking lot and thought, wow, what a sad and angry note. I'm going to keep this because it's so raw and interesting. The next day, Minnie came over to pick up some of her things. Mickey produced the note and it led to a long, tear-filled conversation about their relationship and what went wrong. They didn't end up together because, despite the pseudonyms I've given them, this is no Disney story. However, the resulting discussion helped them both achieve closure in a meaningful way, all because a random coworker kept and found a discarded note in a festival parking lot. I suffered with sack pain for a week or so to save a life. When I was a kid, my family went from the UK to visit my auntie who worked as a nurse in Germany. Being obsessed with Lego at the time, I was excited to be getting to go to the original Legoland in Denmark on the Friday of the week for the weekend. Cue waking up to crippling pain in my groin early in the week. After assuming it was just strain and waiting a few days, on Thursday I was given the choice of going to Denmark the next day or heading to the hospital and staying. I chose the hospital since I was in that much pain. Turns out there wasn't anything to do but take painkillers and chill. When it got round to the Saturday, my aunt went out to get me some Lego to cheer me up. Her and my brother stopped at a swimming pool for a while on the way back, where she was throwing some of those weight toys that they got from the toy store into the pool for him to dive down and get. Some German teenagers were taking the toys, so my auntie tried to shout at them in broken German. So they left to a deserted part of the pool. Next minute, they pull out a toddler from the pool, completely unconscious. The lifeguards apparently had no clue what they were doing and were trying to call an ambulance, so my aunt stepped in and performed CPR until the kid got airlifted to a hospital. A week or so later, my pain had subsided, so we headed back to the pool. A woman came over to ask for some chairs in German, and my mum said, "Sorry, we're English." And the woman asked in English instead. She turned back around and said, "You wouldn't by any chance happen to know the English nurse that saved a little boy last week?" And my mum replied, "Yes, it's my sister." The woman said it was all over the local news that this anonymous English nurse saved the boy's life, and she wouldn't have been in the country if we were in Denmark at the time, let alone be at the pool sending away the teens to find the kid and then saving him. I still have never felt more glad to get a pain in my nads. When I was at college, I had this buddy who I used to give a ride to and from campus each day because we lived a couple of streets apart. One morning, I got Goldfinger, the ska band, not the Bond movie, playing on my CD player in my car. He had never heard them before, really dug it, and asked me about them. It was the day before Easter break, and he was all like, "Cool, I'll check them out." Cut to 2 weeks later, he's telling me how he's bought all their records, got his long-distance girlfriend into them when he visited her, and has basically listened to nothing but them since we spoke about it. I felt good for helping a buddy discover his new favorite band, but thought nothing more of it. That summer, me and this dude have a falling out. Long story, but the short of it is that he screwed me out of nearly £1,000, and a bit later, I stopped seeing him around. After a while, a mutual friend told me he'd dropped out and moved away. The next summer, a friend of mine asks me if I want a ticket to see Real Big Fish that evening. His sister was supposed to go, but is really sick and can't. I say, sure, and tag along. We get there and it turns out the support band is Goldfinger, which is pretty cool. So we're standing there, having a beer in between bands, and I clumsily knock some girl who's walking past's drink out of her hand. I turn and apologize and offer to buy her a replacement. While we're waiting at the bar, we get to talking and we're getting on pretty well. Me and my friend end up hanging out with her and her sisters the whole night, having a great time, and me and this girl end up exchanging numbers. Cut forward again a couple of years, me and said girl have been together basically since that night. We're moving in together and it's going really great. The night we move in together, we're sitting amongst all of our boxes of crap on the only seats that are unpacked, and I say something like, "Imagine if I hadn't taken my friend's offer to go to that Real Big Fish show that night. We'd have never met." She's then like, "Not only that, imagine if you hadn't bumped into me and we hadn't got to talking. Our original plan that night was to leave after Goldfinger played, as they were the only band we were bothered about seeing." I commented something about how I really liked them or something, I forget what, and then I asked how she got into them. I'm paraphrasing, but the long and short of it was, "Oh, my sister got me into them. Her D-bag ex-boyfriend got her into them. They were long distance while she studied in the US. They used to go to shows together when he would visit. He's actually from round here, I think." Yep. Same dude that I used to give rides to. Bonus butterfly effect, My buddy who was with me at that show actually ended up marrying the sister in question last year. In short, managed to set myself and a buddy up with serious relationships just by introducing some random dude who I used to give a ride to school to a band that I liked. Alright, service workers, when did you get to experience your very own, "Sir, this is a Wendy's" moment? This is really weird that this became a meme, because I swear this is true. In about 95, I was driving from New England to Florida for a college spring break trip. Somewhere in South Carolina, we stopped at a Wendy's. Near the hallway to the bathrooms, they had a big map of South Carolina, and I said to a person, "Can you tell me where we are?" I was pretty clearly indicating the map. The lady said, "Honey, you're in a Wendy's." I was like, "Thanks, okay, so, no Big Macs then." One time, this older guy rushes up to order and slams a coupon on the counter saying, "I want this." I pick it up. It has menu items for KFC. I ask him, "What exactly would you like to order?" He instantly gets disgruntled with me for not reading his gosh darn mind and shakes his finger at the coupon and said, "Well, whatever's on the coupon, obviously," in a condescending tone. I just look at him for a minute and say, word for word, "Sir, this is McDonald's. I don't know what you want me to do with this KFC coupon." He looks at me dumbfounded. Then he looks behind me at the menu and around the store and yells, "Ah, crap!" Like this isn't his first time walking into the wrong establishment. He then grabbed the coupon and stormed off. "So, you don't have tables?" "No. I'll just have the General Chicken. This is Pizza Hut." "Fine, just a few egg rolls." "How about a pizza?" "Why would I order pizza at a Chinese restaurant?" "You know what? You're right, that would be stupid." I worked at a liquor store a few years back. One day, a man walks in and puts 2 bottles of whiskey down, and as I'm scanning the bottles, I make the usual small talk. "So, how's your night going?" The man took a deep breath, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Well, I just walked in on my 14-year-old son completely undressed, video chatting with a fricking middle-aged man, so it could be a lot better." I didn't really know what to say to that, so I told him, "Oh, that's not good. Enjoy your drinks." You know what? I wouldn't know what to say about that either. I think your average server is pretty accustomed to giving completely neutral non-answers to awkward things we become privy to. Take your min-wage job badge and wear it proudly, my friend. Also, that man had a valid reason to need a drink. Dude came to drive through. I opened the window. "Sir, how can I help you?" "I'm out of checks," he replies calmly. "I'm not sure I follow you," I say. "I'm out of checks," he says, again, more impatiently. "Right, I heard you, but I don't know what you want me to do about that. You can pay with cash or card too?" The guy gives me a weird look and says, "Oh, this ain't the bank," and pulls out away from the window. I'm a pharmacist. You know, I think someone at that drive-thru is dealing. More likely this is a passphrase. There was a guy dealing out of the McDonald's near where I used to work, and you had to order some weird combination of things to get your substances. I used to work at Target, and they hired a new girl who'd previously worked at Walmart to work the fitting rooms and, by default, the intercom system. A few days after she started, she was about to make an announcement over the intercom, and I guess habit took over because she started the announcement with, "Attention Walmart shoppers." She realized her mistake and made a good recovery with, "You are in the wrong store." Haha, I frickin' relate to this crap. 3 years at Chipotle, and then I started selling boats at Base Pro. My first call was, "Thank you for calling Brodemore Chipotle. You can't buy a boat there, but this is Base Pro, so you're good. What can I do for you on my first day here?" Facepalm. I was working at Brahms, and this guy went on a whole rant about how Queen and all the bands from the 70s and 80s are working with the government to erase memories, all because he heard a lyric wrong. Y'all wouldn't believe the amount of disappointed rich people who come to Panda Express and find out we aren't serving authentic Chinese food. Once a well-traveled rich woman came into Panda Express and stood at the buffet line for about 10 minutes critiquing our mistakes and explaining how Chinese cuisine doesn't actually have fried wontons with cream cheese filling. "Mom, we just fry what came in the bag from a warehouse in California." I was a hostess at Carrabba's. I answered the phone, and a woman asked if we were located at such and such intersection. I told her no and gave her the correct directions. She insisted that I was wrong and that we were located at such and such. I told her that I think she has us confused with another Italian restaurant chain, Johnny Carino's. She still disagreed and tried to argue.
I finally basically said that I'm standing in the building that I work in 5 days a week. I'm pretty sure I know the location of my physical body, and I hung up. I worked at a pizza place and I got a complaint that we delivered sushi. It was a pepperoni pizza, but he couldn't be convinced. I worked at a Chipotle for 4 years and got some pretty interesting requests, but I'll never forget the time someone ordered soup. Chipotle doesn't have soup. I promptly reminded her that this was a Chipotle, but she insisted we could do it. So we made her soup at Chipotle. It was the grossest concoction of bean juice, sofritas, mild, medium, and hot salsa, and sour cream. She was stoked. I used to work at Taco Bell as a drive-thru guy. I just took people's orders, took their money, and gave them their crap, basically. So there's the usual script you have to follow when a customer pulls up. "Hi, welcome to Taco Bell. How are you?" And 90% of them say, "Good, could I get a…" and carry on with their order. The kind 10% of people say, "Good, how are you?" And you'd basically say something like, "Pretty good, thanks for asking. What can I get for you today?" Well, one time I got an outlier. I asked, "Hi, how are you?" And defying all convention, this man on the other end, in a country accent, responded sadly, "Oh, we're not doing too well." It wasn't in a dignified way either. The guy sounded legit upset about something. I was just bewildered. I had no idea what to say. I think after about 5 seconds of silence, I was like, well, sorry to hear that. What can I get for you tonight?" The speaking part of that job is so routine that you just become a customer service robot. Then this sad guy comes through and actually is honest about his current mood, and it just threw me off entirely. I had that once working at McDonald's like 6 years ago. This lady, probably in her 50s, comes to the front counter. I say my NPC greeting script of, "Welcome to McDonald's, how can I help you?" And she, straight-faced, staring into my soul, asked if I would do the deed with her. I was astounded at the confidence and sheer bluntness about it, as well as how inappropriate it was. I stammered out something about me being 16 and that's illegal. She then got all sad-faced and started on about a divorce and she was having a rough time with it. I managed to chime in, "How about a nice burger for some comfort food?" And she ordered one. I never saw her again, thankfully. I worked at the concession stand at a movie theater in high school. This guy orders a popcorn and a large Diet Pepsi. Comes back to the counter about 10 minutes later complaining that his soda is carbonated. I explained to him that all of our sodas are in fact carbonated, and he asks me if we have a microwave. We did, so he wants me to go into the back and microwave his soda. He wants it warm but not too warm. Went to the back and had to pour the soda into 2 different cups because the original wouldn't fit into the microwave. Just a truly bizarre experience. I don't drink anything carbonated, but this is the first time I've heard that microwaving gets rid of the carbonated part. So is it just sugar water that's left over? It's not that exciting, but in my town we have 2 KFCs. One of them is a joint KFC and A&W. I used to work at the standalone place and would always have people try to order burgers, shakes, cheese curds, and other A&W products because they didn't realize that they're different restaurants. You know what? Reading through this thread is starting to convince me that dishwashing was actually the lucky position. Yeah, you know what? There may be other gross, physically exhausting and underpaid jobs in the service and hospitality industries, but given my own experience with customers and reading about these ones here, the narrator is fairly certain he picked the wrong side of the business to work in. Worked at McDonald's. We'd always get people that would ask for a Whopper burger, either seriously or trying to be funny. Cue the exhausted, "We don't sell Whoppers, sir, we have the Big Mac." In response, we usually get an, "Oh right, okay, one of those." Until one day we have a guy come through drive-thru that asks for a large Whopper burger, and an instant reply back, "Sir, we don't sell Whoppers here, we have Big Macs or Quarter Pounders or McChickens." He replied, "Nah, I don't want that, I want a Whopper." "Sir, we don't sell those, this is a Macca's. The closest equivalent would be a Big Mac, but it's not a Whopper. If you want an actual Whopper burger, you need to go to Hungry Jack's, which is what we call Burger King here." He replies, "Give me a frickin' Whopper meal." "Okay, sir, I can't give you a Whopper meal here, but I can order a Big Mac meal for you. The Big Mac is the closest equivalent we have, but it is not a Whopper. Are you happy with a large Big Mac meal instead?" Yeah, was that so hard? We give him a large Big Mac meal at drive-thru, and sure enough, 10 minutes later, he's back through the drive-thru, screaming into the speaker that he hasn't gotten his Whopper burger. And yeah, I'm from Australia. Burger King is known as Hungry Jack's here because when BK first arrived to Australia, there was already a small chain of locally owned burger restaurants in Sydney called Burger King. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and one time a customer came through drive-thru and complained to us that the drive-thru was built in a way that made it very hard to drive. She started yelling at my co-workers, so I just put down what I was doing and told her, "Mom, we can't change the construction of the building." Like, seriously, what did she want us to do? I just make sandwiches. Working at Home Depot, I got my face ripped off because this lady wanted to return a label maker, and nothing that we scanned came up in our system. She demanded a manager, so that's when I stepped in. What seems to be the problem, ma'am? I'm trying to return this product, and you guys are telling me I can't. Well, unfortunately, when we scan it on our system, nothing comes up. Are you certain you got it at Home Depot? Absolutely. Ma'am, I apologize, but if it doesn't come up in our system, there's no way for me to refund you. If you can provide a receipt, I'd be more than happy to help you. She storms off angrily and comes back hours later. Hey, so I wanted to apologize. Oh yeah? I found the receipt for the label maker. It was from Office Depot. We had a good laugh, and I told her I appreciated her coming back in.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I worked at a bakery, and it wasn't uncommon for guys in their 30s or 40s to bring in their dates and place large imaginary orders. Seriously, this happened like 10 to 12 times a year. They'd look at the case and flip through some photos, and then come up to the counter and be all gross, schmoozy, rubbing up on their date like, "Baby, anything you want. You can't decide which flavor? Ma'am, put me down for one cake in each flavor. One whole cake. One donut every flavor. Put a heart decoration on each one." After the first couple of times, we started pretending to write it on scratch paper and then throwing the paper away at the end of the night. They'd never schedule a time or date to pick up, and if you tried to take the order seriously and get details, they'd get rude as all heck, because I guess yelling at employees was also seen as hot in this scenario. It had to have been like one guy at a workplace who did it and told all of his friends because it was so fricking weird, and I've never heard of it being a thing elsewhere. Work at Panera. Guest calls in from his car, several people in the background, all giving orders for pickup. The first order is something simple. The next order is an item we don't carry, a salmon dish of some kind. I know there are some regional Paneras that have or have had salmon, but we're not one of them. So I let them know, "Hey, I'm sorry, but we don't carry salmon. Maybe..." And the person on the other end cuts me off and starts getting really aggressive. "Yes, you do! You do!" they scream. "But I don't. We don't." So then I'm like, "Hey, maybe you're thinking of another chain we're very similar to," and I start to list off some other place, and they cut me off again, screaming, "I know you have freaking salmon! What the frick? I just ate it the other day!" And at this point, I'm just being honest with them and saying, "Hey man, I don't really need this attitude. We don't have salmon. I can't make the dish for you. You have us confused with something else." There's a long silence, and finally someone else, not the person who's been yelling, says, "Wait, this isn't," and he gives the name of a completely different chain. I say, "No, it's not." And then everyone in the car starts yelling at each other, and I hang up. Customer service is the worst. About 11 years ago, I had just gone into management at McDonald's, and they sent me to practice running our location inside a Walmart. Two older ladies, probably in their 70s or 80s, came in, and while one came up to my register, the other sat down about 15 feet away in a booth. They both looked and sounded frail. The exchange went like this. I said, "Hi, what can I get for you today?" The first lady, "Yes, I'll have the lunch meat combo." I'm sorry, what? "The lunch meat combo." "I'm sorry, we don't have that here." "Oh, well, what do you have?" "Well, we have burgers, fish, chicken." "Wait, what is this place?" It's a McDonald's." The first lady turns to look at her friend and literally yells, "They don't have the lunch meat combo here." The other lady, sitting 15 feet away, "What? I said they don't have the lunch meat combo. What do they have? It's McDonald's." "What? McDonald's? Where are we?" Lady one looks at me. "Just give us a couple of minutes, dear." I say, "No problem, take your time." At that point, I had to step away because the interaction reminded me so much of the SpongeBob episode with the two older ladies and the chocolate bars that I was about to die laughing. So I had someone else take over the register and told them to promo their meals because they made my day. This is wild. At least they seemed nicer than about 90% of the other stories we're reading in here too. And now I have to go watch this episode of SpongeBob to give me some context. Worked at Chick-fil-A for too many gosh-awful years. A guy walks in looking at his phone and says, "I'd like the fish sandwich combo." Cue confused blinking on my part, and then I finally asked, "What was that?" The guy looks up from his phone, sighs, and said, "I want the fish sandwich." I say, "Sir, this is Chick-fil-A. Literally all we have is chicken." He finally looked up at the menu behind me, then around the restaurant, completely bewildered, turned around and walked out. I don't even know how he drove there, parked, and walked in without noticing where he was. Worked at a small roadside produce place. My boss had a few different stalls, so I was often left to run the stall myself. I remember this lady walked up.
Do you have any tomatoes?
"No, sorry, we don't."
But the place down the street has them.
"Then go there." Someone asked me, "What type of meat is on the grilled chicken sandwich?" I responded, "Muskrat." He didn't think it was very funny. My family runs concessions trailers at fairs. Lots of great stories, but this one always sticks out. We have a giant 16-bay steam table directly in front of the serving counter. It's old and some pans don't sit quite right, so there's always a bit of steam leaking out. Our trailer is built around one item, pierogies, and the trailer is even called that. All the signs advertise pierogies in big letters. So one day it's like 90 degrees out and sweat is just running off all of us. We're packed, the line is running down the street, and we're 8 servers deep at the window. Customer comes up to the window after standing in line for probably about 15 minutes, sees us with soaked shirts and headbands, steam pouring out of the trailer, and they ask, "What flavor ice cream do you have?" A customer called the store with a very specific request that I did my best to fulfill. She had her husband pick it up. He returned 20 minutes later with food thrown in a bag out of its container and then threw it across the counter at me. His wife called to tell me I would never amount to anything. I was on my final 2 weeks, so telling her to make her own dinner was particularly rewarding. I worked at a Chili's, and when I was hosting, old people would constantly come in and talk about how weird it was that we redecorated so suddenly. And where did the salad bar go? They thought we were Sizzlers, which was 2 buildings away from us. It happened at least 4 times. I also work there, and it amazes me that people make that mistake everywhere. I have people come in to pick up food and get incensed at the fact that we don't have their name on our list, and we must have screwed up. Then I ask what's on their order, and they rattle off food from the Outback Steakhouse, which is next door. They say nothing and walk out the door. Like, I get making mistakes, but how do you miss a giant pepper on the side of the building, expecting steaks with an Australian theme? I worked at a pharmacy and once had a doctor call in to ask if we do doctor's notes. The pharmacist carefully explained that this was a pharmacy and that only doctor's offices can give out doctor's notes. We only receive prescriptions. The man said okay, then after a moment of hesitation asked again and received a gentle but firm no. The pharmacist got angry and hung up with him after telling him no yet again. We received a call from him 3 more times. I picked up the last one and answered, "This is," and I gave a different pharmacy name. "How can I help you?" He started out by asking if we were located on John Street. I said no. Then he asked if we do doctor's notes yet again. After a brief pause where I contemplated life, I just responded, "Sir, we're a pharmacy." He then proceeded to hang up on me. What a jerk. I used to manage a Del Taco during my high school teenage years, and we had an older man come in once a month and drive straight past the speaker to our window. At said window, he'd look at me until I came over, start ordering Starbucks, and then midway through realize it was a Del Taco and drive off. Once a month, every month, for 2 years. I worked in a Jimmy John's. A dude in a military uniform came in asking about a military discount. I told him we don't give military discounts, to which he proceeded to flip out, pull out his phone and start recording a video, ranting about how we won't give him his military discount like he deserves. When I was really young and had recently tried fried calamari, I confused it with the fried clam strips at White Castle. I was adamant that they had fried calamari and convinced my dad to order it for me at the window. They laughed at him. I worked in a restaurant and people can get Deliveroo or Uber Eats from us. A couple of times a week, a driver will show up and show us their phone with an order for a 12-inch sub. Yeah mate, that's the Subway across the street, we're a pizzeria. Read the address. God knows how they find the customers' houses. I worked at Burger King when I was a teenager. We're short-staffed one day and the girl on the drive-thru was on break, so our manager stepped in to cover her. He was pretty old and didn't have the best hearing, so most customers were pulling around to the window to talk to him as he was struggling to hear through the headset. Anyway, this one guy rolls up to the windows and shouts,
I want a large Big Mac meal with a Coke, please! Is that so damn hard? My manager very calmly says, My apologies, sir, that won't be difficult. He leans out the window and points down the road. There's a McDonald's about 3 miles in that direction, they'll be able to help. Have a nice day, sir. Then he just closes the window and walks around the corner out of sight. I laughed so hard. I worked at Dairy Queen, had a lady saunter in all frustrated, bag in hand, whipped out her receipt without giving me much context and said, There's supposed to be a buyer blast. I told her, Mom, this is for Taco Bell. She quickly said, My bad, and sped out of the restaurant. I think she was making up a story and did it in the wrong store. Also, the number of people who asked, Do you serve ice cream is way too fricking high. What did a crazy stalker do because they had a crush on you? He asked to meet. I told him I wasn't home. He answered with, But your light's on. He lived nowhere near me. My street is a cul-de-sac, so there's no reason he was passing by. He was creepy in many other ways as well. He told people we were in love. Nope. That we had forbidden love. Nope. And kept messaging me for years. I stopped responding in the first year. I was between 15 to 23 and he was 23 to 31. Even when I was living in another city, he kept telling people about our love. He acted like a normal, sweet guy, so people had trouble believing me. I had to deny more than once that I'd ever kissed him, and I was his friend briefly when I was 15 and ignored him. It only stopped when I randomly met a friend of his in the city I live in and showed him all of the messages. The guy was shocked. As far as I know, his friend talked with him and he finally stopped. Curiously, he began dating a girl with the same name as mine. Creepy as frick. He proposed marriage so aggressively that he had to be escorted off the premises, and then later broke the lock off my dorm room and tried to get into bed with me. I invited her to hang out. She was already outside my place waiting for the call. Took pictures of me while I slept. There was a group of us all sleeping in one room. I woke up to see him taking photos of me. Plucked a hair off of my jacket and ate it in front of me. He broke into my cousin's house and stole my guinea pig to feed to a snake because I wouldn't break up with my boyfriend to date him. She sent me threatening pictures after she found out I had a girlfriend. My state's psychiatric care is a joke. I had her hospitalized multiple times and they'd first pump her full of drugs and send her home. The police were an even bigger joke, and they couldn't understand why a guy wouldn't want a beautiful woman to be obsessed with them. They didn't seem to understand that I needed a restraining order not only for my own safety, but to keep her safe from herself. I inevitably had to be moved out of state, change banks, phone companies, jobs, and I dropped off social media just to have a life that existed outside of her. Several years later, she did thank me for it. Good on you for doing what you could to get away for both of your sakes, and to her for recognizing that she had an issue. Hopefully you managed to get an even better life in your new setting. Found out he'd been telling my co-workers that we'd been dating for weeks, when in reality I'd never spoken to the guy in my life. Found out when I was asked about my crazy weekend with my boyfriend, when I am in fact single as all hell. This was a while ago, in high school, so I don't know if I can really fault him for being an idiot, but he told everyone we knew that I was his dream girl and that we were going to get married. He actively sought out rumors of who I was crushing on, or who was crushing on me, or just any guy who had talked to me and tell them to please let him have the chance and to not ask me out. Weirdest thing was I didn't even really talk to him and didn't even know his last name. I just said hi during calculus every day. Wrote racy fictional material about me in which I said, "Stop, I'm only 16. He was in his mid-20s at the time. Walked a good 5 miles with me because she was going my way. I was almost home before I found out she lived 30 seconds from the pub I met her in. She said she'd have to stay at mine as it wasn't safe for her to walk home alone. I ended up having to explain that I wasn't attracted to her and had to call her a taxi home and pay for it. Wrote a love letter in blood. Somehow, the teacher got hold of it, and then the whole school found out. I had someone I worked with at a movie theater ask me out, and I told them I wasn't looking for a boyfriend. So, the next time he was closing and I was opening the next morning, he poured popcorn salt all over the office desk and shaped it to say, "Die," and then my name. One of my brother's friends tried to impress a girl by shoving his whole hand down his throat. They stole my hat and refused to give it back because it smelled like me. paid someone to attack me so they could rescue me. Didn't work. Hit the attacker with a book bag, pinned him down. He started yelling that he had been paid to do it just as the other guy showed up. I was on my way home from work, he knew my schedule, and I took the bus. A junior in high school tried to tickle my pickle in front of my friend when I was a senior because she thought I was cute. This isn't the only advance she made, but after this she lost her mind a bit. I used to be a mall cop, and one of the girls at the frozen yogurt place asked me to prom publicly on Instagram as her Man Crush Monday. I was 20 and out of the high school mindset, so it was pretty embarrassing. I politely declined and the post came down. Not really disturbing, I just always felt so bad that she shot her shot so publicly for it to not work out. These comments make me really glad that I'm ugly. This guy I knew for a while went out of his way to introduce himself to me. He was nice enough, we hung out in a group sometimes. Eventually he started to do weird stuff. He asked me where I'd bought some new clothes, and then I saw him the next week wearing the exact same clothes, the shirt and jeans and shoes. Then I started seeing his car in my street at random times of the night. I got up to go to the bathroom one night and to let my cat in, and he was sitting in his car watching my house. I wasn't scared of this guy, he was weaker than me, but it was really weird. He'd call me and put me on speakerphone and then record our conversations. I found this out from a mutual friend. Anyway, I made sure he knew I didn't like it, and I stopped hanging out with that group of friends. Then a few months later, I received a call from one of my best friends who told me a story about the same guy who'd copied his exact hair color, which was red and black and blonde at the time. Since then, we always think back to this guy and laugh. We call him Stalker Adam. To be fair, he wasn't dangerous, I think he was just awkward and lonely and didn't know how to cope with his feelings. Snapped my bra strap to get my attention. Put a pipe bomb in my husband's truck. Hey, free pipe bomb though. She stole a bunch of my homework and then asked me out in a very passive-aggressive manner. Then she followed me home, rang my doorbell, and demanded I go out with her. We were 14 and her parents drove her. I think I just told her to go home and close the door. I didn't really know how to deal with sociopaths back then, and she took it pretty badly. She did not leave me alone after that. Frequent calls and shaming, but she didn't do anything crazy and it didn't really escalate. I don't know if this counts, but I broke up with an ex because I just wasn't into her. Started dating a new girl and ran into my ex at a party a few weeks ago. She pulled me into the bathroom and showed me her thigh in which she had carved my name into it, claiming she still loved me and we'd only dated a month. I was a 19-year-old waitress at the time, and a 49-year-old man that I'd served tried to connect with me through the missed connections page on Craigslist. He then came to my work and professed his love for me in a Christmas card that ironically had a cartoon of Santa being kicked in the nads by a child with the caption, "Stranger Danger." In his note, he said he wasn't sure if I'd be interested in an older man and he had a wife and children, so we'd have to find a way around that little detail. I didn't feel safe at work, so I had the police intervene and tell him not to bother me again. Well, even if literally every other thing this man did wasn't a glaring red flag, that card showing that child safety was going too far told you everything you should know about him. Nice of him to give you written evidence to assist in your case, though. Showed up at my job and requested me by name, to serve her and her new boyfriend. She kept saying how great he was in bed. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. Trying to do the things my girlfriend did, like stepping on my shoes while holding onto my shoulders, hugging me, among other things. I came home from high school and my college-age crusher was sitting on the sofa chatting with my family. What the frick? I only went on 2 very platonic dates with him. I was only friendly, but he had way more in mind. He actually asked my parents if he could marry me because I was such a virginal angel, despite repeated texts and calls. Goodbye and good riddance. My God. I used to train with this girl who was crude and blunt, but kind of pretty, and she was a heavy hitter, so she'd spar with the lads as well. No girl wanted to be her spar partner. After having my first go with her as partner, I took some hits and realized she was way too strong to duke it out with, so I began grappling. After a few weeks of this routine, she began to get good at grappling as well. It got weird. She managed to catch my back and just whispered, "If I tap you out, we can do it like dogs later. How about it?" And honest to God, for a second I felt like I was going to become an unspeakable act victim right there and then. I learned later that she had a crush on me but was too embarrassed to do anything normal about it. This guy lived a while away from me, so he learned where I studied from a friend of mine. I didn't tell him for many reasons, and he came one day without saying anything to me. I told him that I had classes that day, but he insisted that I should stay with him. Even though he knew I had a boyfriend, he kissed me and bought me a gift. When I told him I wasn't interested, again, he cried and shouted at me. She went through every picture I had on my MySpace and took pictures of herself in the same pose or scene and then sent them to me. She did that around 20 to 25 times. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, I knew a mentally ill girl who had a crush on me for a while and did various stalkery things, including showing up at my work, changing her phone number 4 times to trick me into answering, and running away from home by hopping on a bus to a city 6 hours away, and then texting me at 3 a.m. that she had changed her mind and asked me to come pick her up and bring her home. At no point did I ever indicate any interest in her whatsoever. On the contrary, I repeatedly told her we'd never be together, but it was just in one ear and out the other. But the crap she pulled with me pales in comparison to another guy she also had a crush on. He was living with a few friends, and their place was a pretty regular hangout for a whole bunch of people. Consequently, they almost never locked doors. She showed up and let herself in one afternoon while they were all at work, and he came home to find her sleeping in his bed. He had to threaten to call the police to get her to leave. Another time, she literally hid behind some bushes with a knife, and when he came walking by, she jumped out and told him she'd self-delete if he didn't hug her. Ugh, my stalker married me. I have such a big crush, I'm going to make sure you can't ever leave me by law. A guy that saw me working in Subway once brought his entire family to meet me. I'd never met the guy. I only know who he was because he was with a group of guys staring at me there a week earlier. They apparently waited over an hour. It started asking about me so much that the workers started keeping me updated on when the guy was there so I could avoid him. Broke into my house and laid down on my couch with me while I was taking a nap. Oh god, this has brought the memories flooding back. So this happened in my first grade in school. First, she once walked up to me randomly and started scratching my back. Like just wildly down my back like a raptor trying to claw something. That's when I began to think she was weird. But then there was the main event. The class was sitting on the ground for story time. A girl named F was wearing a purple dress and white stockings sits down next to me. Then as the teacher begins to read, I feel her bite me hard on my shoulder. I scream out in pain and begin to cry. The teacher looks up confused and I say that F bit me. The girl looks confused and says, "But I like you, that's why I bit you." Needless to say, I didn't like her after that. Funny thing was, I did think she looked cute that day. After the bite, though, I made sure to keep my distance from her. I vaguely noticed a car that was behind me the entire way to work from like the second turn I made out of my house. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I pulled into work and this guy walks over to my car and opens the door and I was like, "What the fu- Oh, hey? What's up?" It was some dude I'd served 2 weeks ago named Bob. So he said something along the lines of, "I bought this book for you." We'd talked about how I like to read and he had recommended this author. So I'm still pretty weirded out that he opened my door and we're the only ones in the parking lot, so I just quickly said, "Thank you," and told him I'd see him inside once my shift started. He then goes on to say, "You didn't see me behind you the whole way? I was waving my arms out the window, but you wouldn't look back. I knew it was you because I remembered your license plate is," and he just read off my number plate. At this point, I'm just calculating in my head how to get the frick out of the situation and internally just freaking. I don't even remember what I said, but it was something to the effect of, "Oh, no, I didn't see you, but hey, I've really got to go in." Oh, but wait, there's more. He then says, "Oh, well, I live right next to you. Are you in the white apartments or the orange ones? I'm in the golf community right up the street. I drove around to the white ones for a while looking for you so I could give you the book." What the frick? I just told him I really had to go or I'd be late. I went inside and hid in the back for like half an hour until he left and told management and they've put him on the banned list. This was 2 weeks ago and I've been parking my car 3 buildings over and walking to my apartment because he memorized my plate number. Every time I drive, I've been scoping out everyone around me to make sure it's not him. He mentioned leaving to go up north for a few weeks the last day I served him, so I think he's gone, but he'll be back eventually, and I don't really know what else to do other than keep him banned from my work. I met this guy one time, for frick's sake. Sorry this got so long, it's been stressing me out. Nobody had a crush on me, I was the one having said crush. I wrote my phone number on a potato and rolled it to them when I was in 9th grade. I never got a call. Not my brightest moment, to be honest. The old Irish hello. I think you should have tried it out a few more times just to be sure, but then again I guess it's not a winning method for everybody. A classmate of mine who I barely talked to came up to me on Valentine's Day and handed me chocolates and a huge teddy bear with my name sewn into it. A bit weird, but I was appreciative of the gift. However, the worst part is that they handed me a drawing of me leaning on a motorcycle in very revealing clothes that looked kinky as all heck. Keep in mind that my fashion is quite conservative. And they then proceeded to loudly recite a 2-page-long love poem in public whilst I was with my friends. The poem referred to me as his princess, love of his life, among other things. I rejected him and never spoke to him again. You know, when I read that first paragraph, I was thinking, oh, that's too much, but the intent is kind of sweet. Then the second part, and oh no. He cornered me in the hallway when I was on my way to the restroom and proceeded to lean forward, purse his lips, and close his eyes, like I'd been waiting to kiss him my entire life. I proceeded to tell him, "Not today, Daniel," and go about my business. Also, the kid was 5 and I was his teacher. Alright, I should clarify, I'm 5'9", and by cornered I mean ran up to me in the hall, stopped about 2 feet in front of me, blocking my path, and then did the above. Of course, he was 5, so it wasn't really that difficult to get around him. Daniel did this on the regular, actually. His home life wasn't amazing, and I got the feeling he was just starved for attention. A lot of the other teachers, especially the ones that had him before me, didn't think he'd amount to anything since he was always acting up in class. But I like to give all of my kids a chance. Once I gave him a little more one-on-one time that he really needed, he stopped being so disruptive and apparently developed a crush on me. She made me a poster board, scrapbook style, of the moments of our friendship she'd interpreted romantically. Show up at my work at like 4 a.m. and stare into the dark restaurant watching me while I prepped the baking for the day alone. They also advanced the creep and started showing up in my apartment building at weird hours. Told me she had dreams of unaliving me and actually had plans too. It creeped me the frick out, but still I could see she had some serious mental problems and I tried to help her as much as I could. I mockingly called her my special little snowflake while flirting. She had never heard of the label snowflake before. The next day she shows me her new tattoo of a snowflake. They hid in a closet while I did the deed with someone else. Not so bad, but freshman year of college, I had a girl in my class both semesters, and she would not stop staring at me or trying to sit next to me. She'd make comments like, "I like your voice," or uncommon stuff like that, and when I said I had a girlfriend, she called her a hussy. He announced he had a crush on someone in our therapy group while staring directly at me. The entire session was derailed to awkwardly deal with his feelings while I wanted to melt into the floor. We got coffee one time after a group session and he went and did this. I was 19, he was 25, and he knew I had issues with social anxiety. Top 5 worst experiences of my life, hands down. When I was in high school, a painfully shy girl in my art class secretly painted a portrait of me. We were supposed to paint a portrait of a historical figure. We were assigned 6 classes to work on our projects. She shyly showed it to me and said, "This is you." I was stunned, especially since in her eyes I looked like Marty Feldman, the guy who played Igor in the movie Young Frankenstein, only less attractive. Also, one of my ears seemed to have taken flight and was about half an inch away from the side of my head. Since her painting was in my hands, I gave her my portrait of Ben Franklin to her and stammered something and left. Upon reflection, my Ben Franklin probably did bear a passing resemblance to her. I mean, not the glasses, but, you know. They started speaking in my native language when nobody taught him and listening to the same music as I do. I'd never shared my playlist with him. Weirdest case I've ever had is where a girl challenged me to a table tennis match, but she used her flip-flops as dual-wielded pedals. It was 2 a.m. One stood on top of a desk and asked me to kiss him in front of the class. Yeah, that was odd. Next one kissed my knee? I don't know what he was doing. And then there was the one who bullied my little brother and called me bad names all the time because he thought it would get me to like him. No, calling me a fat slag isn't going to get me to be into you, honey. She asked if I wanted to go on a date. I said no. She undressed in the middle of high school and asked, "How about now?" while caressing her body. I said no again and went to my girlfriend, now my wife. Asked me if I had a boyfriend. After I said yes, he didn't like that. Red flags started going off in my head. They made me an axe with my name carved into the handle. It was pretty crude and it was the most bizarre display of affection I've ever received. Anytime they don't take no for an answer, it always weirds me out. I told a guy no several times today while I was trying to work and that I had a boyfriend. Ended up telling him, "Sir, I have a boyfriend and I'm 7 months pregnant." His response? "Oh, I'm very good with kids." What was the dirtiest trick ever pulled in the history of war? During the Second World War, German forces would rig crooked wall paintings to explode when straightened with hopes that it would kill Allied officers when they came in to set up command posts. The logic being that Private Joe Blow clearing the building looking for enemies isn't going to care or even notice if a painting is askew. But General Robert Important Guy, who sets up his new command post in the building and is in his office for hours, probably would notice. The Germans also strung piano wire across roads to take out anyone riding by in a jeep. Yep, my gramps told me a story about this. After he was wounded for his 3rd time, they made him a courier. He was on a motorcycle and because of these piano wires, he'd always ride hunched over. He lost a small piece of scalp instead of his head when he drove underneath one of these wires. When Timur the Lame was about to attack the city of Sivas, he promised the 3,000 Christian Armenian Sipahis that he wouldn't shed any of their blood if they surrendered. So they surrendered, and true to his word, he had them all buried alive. In World War I, the Allies became used to the smell of chemical weapons and would put their gas masks on quickly. The Germans changed their tactics and then would use nearly odorless, stomach-emptying chemicals that would absorb quickly into the lungs first. Then, once the soldiers were all spewing up and couldn't keep their gas masks on, they would fire the main artillery barrage containing the lethal chemicals. According to some records in the art of war, it's considered a good strategy to corner your men and have the enemy attempt to wipe them out. Because when the only means of escape or survival is through the enemy, then your own men will fight to the death. The actor George Sanders found out that his friend David Niven was very chummy with Winston Churchill during the war. He asked Niven to give the Prime Minister a note detailing his idea for a new bomb that the RAF could drop on German cities. It would be exactly the same as all the old bombs, except it would have a wind-activated siren attached to it. So when the bombs dropped, the German civilian population hiding in shelters would hear the siren, think the all clear was being sounded and come out just as the bombs hit. Niven didn't say how Churchill took the idea. Yep, a good reminder that although the people who were most arguably the least evil did in fact win, the maximization of civilian casualties were an accepted measure in decreasing enemy morale for a quicker victory. It's absolutely horrific. I don't envy the people making these calls. Not sure if this counts as a trick, but Napoleon prior to the Battle of Marengo. Not only did he cross the Alps with his entire army, a completely unexpected move, but once across, the Austrians thought that Napoleon would move to Genoa in order to relieve the siege of that city. Thousands were dying of starvation, and the French general Massena desperately called for Napoleon's aid. Napoleon, in a ruthless and surprising move, ignored the calls for help and instead moved to attack the main portion of the Austrian army, eventually winning the Battle of Marengo. Massena surrendered Genoa, and it would be years before he eventually forgave Napoleon for abandoning him. And it would be years before Napoleon forgave Massena for surrendering. Counter-terror and anti-crime units have been seeding black market arms dealers with explosive-laced ammo. When fired, the bullets tend to have a small explodey effect on the weapons, rendering the weapon useless, and typically giving the user non-lethal but disfiguring hand and facial injuries. This bad ammo looks and feels like every other bullet that the dealer has sold, so the only solution is to stop using that arms dealer. Now you can't trust your existing arms dealer, and you have to find a new one that may or may not have tainted ammo or even be a Fed. In essence, it shuts down the entire illegal arms industry at the cost of about 1 or 2 crates of C4 bullets mixed in with the others. The Battle of Majnoon in the Iraqi-Iranian War. You wait until nighttime and you'll see how we're killing these Iranian dogs, an Iraqi officer said with a broad grin. We're frying them like eggplants. He then took us on a tour of dozens of thick electrical cables his troops had lain through the marshy battlefield, a spaghetti network that snaked in and out of the patchwork of lagoons. He showed us the mammoth electric generators that fed the exposed power lines from positions just behind the Iraqi front lines. And when the Iranian Revolutionary Guards made their regular evening advance, the officer and his men demonstrated the macabre genius of their invention. Iraqi gun batteries fired just enough artillery to force the Revolutionary Guards from their marsh boats, and when hundreds of them had been forced to continue their advance through the lagoons on foot, the men at the Iraqi generators flipped a few switches and sent thousands of volts of electricity surging through the marshland. Within seconds, hundreds of Iranians were electrocuted. This occurred nightly. In the trenches of France in World War I, General Monash was given the unenviable task of punching through the German line to claim the French town of Le Hamel. The way that Monash went about doing this was both revolutionary and bloody sneaky. The German forces were well equipped and well fortified, reinforced with heavy artillery and machine guns, and the troops were very well trained. Faced with those odds, Monash began to condition the German forces. Every day at dawn, he'd let loose a barrage of smoke bombs, followed by regular mustard gas canisters. The Germans, following their training, would equip themselves with gas masks which protected them. Monash kept up this bombardment for 2 weeks, and soon the Germans became accustomed to the pattern of attack, and would immediately don their gas masks and hunker down at the first sign of smoke. But on the dawn of the 4th of July, the smoke bombs were not followed by gas, but by Australians. The German gas masks protected them from the mustard gas and smoke, but they also vastly impeded their vision, hearing, and ability to communicate. With the noise of the battle and the obscuring smoke, they were deaf and blind on the battlefield. And to make things worse, this was not an unprotected infantry mass attack, but a creeping barrage supported by a division of tanks, heavy artillery, and aircraft. The tanks protected the vulnerable infantry, and the artillery and aircraft prevented the Germans from effectively deploying anti-tank measures. The battle was over in just 90 minutes and marked the rise of mixed arms warfare. Not sure if it's been posted yet or not, but the Ghost Army was a pretty great trick. Maybe not dirty, but still really clever and underhanded. The 1,100-man unit was given a unique mission within the Allied Army to impersonate other Allied Army units to deceive the enemy. From a few weeks after D-Day when they landed in France until the end of the war, they put on a traveling road show, utilizing inflatable tanks, sound trucks, fake radio transmissions, scripts, and pretense. They staged more than 20 battlefield deceptions, often operating very close to the front lines. Their story was kept secret for more than 40 years after the war, and elements of it remain classified. I think that's so frickin' cool. You had entire airfields full of fake planes and stuff, and Germany was running around going crazy over it, but it was all fake. So perfect. Plus the insignia is really cool. The narrator has naturally Googled this insignia, and it's a very cartoony ghost blasting lightning out of its hands. I don't know that it's the coolest one of the war, but it is very unique and memorable, and I think this kind of unit is a nice diversion from the atrocities we've been reading about, and we're sure to read more of them very shortly. Case in point, Genghis Khan, in a large-scale attack against the fortress at Volohai, after being unable to breach the walls, demanded 1,000 cats and 10,000 Chinese swallows in exchange for lifting the siege. When the defenders sent out the animals, Genghis took them and tied tufts of cotton to their tails and ignited them, at which point the animals rushed back to their homes within the city, igniting hundreds of small fires, while Genghis's army attacked again and took the fortress amidst the panic. The Russians and their use of a scorched earth policy. I can't think of a better way to flip off your invaders than ruining all of your own stuff so that when they do take it, it's worthless. Not only that, but the land itself is just too damn cold. So go ahead, take the land. You'll just freeze to death. Congratulations. Before the Battle of Yorktown in the US Civil War, the Confederate General Magruder was able to convince McClellan that he had 40,000 troops manning his defenses rather than his actual force of 10,000. If I recall correctly, he found a point in the defenses where he knew his troops would be observed and counted and marched them past that point several times. McClellan had 120,000 troops and superior artillery, but like always, he hesitated to attack even with superior numbers. He also thought that another general was approaching with 60,000 men, which is actually close to the actual number, and didn't want to attack Magruder's 40,000 and be hit by 60,000 as well. So he waited for his own reinforcements and more reconnaissance. If he had attacked Magruder, he would have overwhelmed him and been able to prepare for Johnston's arrival. Instead, he waited to attack until Magruder's forces were reinforced. Johnston arrived and added even more troops, and the Confederates were eventually able to slip away from the battlefield with only 300 casualties. In short, Magruder marched troops in a circle past his enemies, making 10,000 men look like 40,000, causing the cautious McClellan to hesitate and waste the opportunity. This is exactly what Russia did in 1955 with the Bear and Bison bombers, knowing that Western intelligence was likely to be watching the military parade through Red Square. They simply flew a single squadron in one large loop over the parade, giving the impression of having way more bombers than they actually had. Unfortunately for the Russians, the U-2 spy planes soon uncovered their actual numbers, but it was an extremely effective bluff in the short term. The British pulled a dirty trick during the African campaign in World War II. At every well and oasis they could find, they hung up a sign that said, "Danger! Poison!" in English and German. It was only when the Germans complained that poisoning wells was a war crime that the British pointed out that, yes, poisoning wells was a war crime, but merely hanging signs was not. The water was perfectly drinkable. On a similar note, how many mines does it take to make a minefield? One sign. I nominate the Vietnamese defeating the Chinese Han in 938 near Ha Long Bay, copying the relevant section from Wikipedia. By the time the Chinese general Liu Hongkao arrived in Vietnamese waters with the Southern Han expedition, Liu Hongkao's plan was to ascend the Vietnamese Bac Dang River and to place his army in the heart of Jacanato Chao before disembarking. The Bac Dang was the major riverine route into the Red River Plain from the north. The Vietnamese general Ngo Quyen anticipated this plan and brought his army to the mouth of the river. He had his men plant a barrier of large poles in the bed of the river. The tops of the poles reached just below the water level at high tide and were sharpened and tipped with iron. When Liu Hongkao appeared off the mouth of the river, Quyen sent out small, shallow-drafted boats at high tide to provoke a fight and then retreat upriver, drawing the Chinese fleet in pursuit. As the tide fell, the heavy Chinese warboats were caught on the poles and lay trapped in the middle of the river, whereupon they were attacked by Ngo Quyen's forces. If I recall correctly, this wasn't the only time this strategy was employed. I'd have to go back to my books, but I think it was used again in the 1200s. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Washington crossing the Delaware, sneaking into the Hessian camp while they were drunk, and celebrating Christmas. 3 American losses versus 22 losses on the Hessian side and 1,000 prisoners. Capture of their weapons, gunpowder, and supplies. So there's this kind of honey made in Turkey called mad honey. It's made from the pollen of rhododendron flowers. If you eat very much of it, you get very intoxicated, and you often hallucinate. You can even take a lethal amount of it. A few times in antiquity, it was used as a weapon of war. For example, the Persians left some of the Romans to find it. The Romans ate that sweet stuff right up, and the Persians attacked them while they were all tripping and defenseless. In the same way that he did his diligence about the Ghost Legion in his last comment, the narrator kind of feels inclined to track down a sample of this mad honey and try it for himself. Purely for research purposes, of course. Saint Nazaire was a heavily defended seaport during World War II. The British commandos disguised the destroyer HMS Campbelltown as a German destroyer and filled it with as much explosives as they could. They sailed the ship past the spotlights, signaling that their radio was broken using signal lights. Eventually, the Germans did catch on and opened fire on the ship, but too late. The Campbelltown lowered the Nazi flag, raised the Union Jack, and the ship rammed the dry dock at full speed. Sadly, the timer on the explosives was faulty and the dry dock was barely damaged. 2/3 of the commandos were killed or captured, and the mission was deemed an abysmal failure. However, 6 hours later, just as the commandos were being mocked by a Gestapo officer for the failed operations, the explosives went off, blew the entire dry dock to pieces, and put it out of commission for the rest of the war. Reportedly, there was much gloating among the British prisoners as in a matter of seconds, the operation went from an abysmal failure to one of the greatest successes in the history of the commandos. There's a great quote from the Forgotten Voices of the Second World War. Just before the Campbelltown exploded, Sam Beatty was being interrogated by a German naval officer who was saying that it wouldn't take very long to repair the damage the Campbelltown had caused. Just at that moment, she went up. Beatty smiled at the officer and said, "We're not quite as foolish as you think." Crac de Chevalier was a Crusader castle in Syria and one of the most important castles in the world with imposing walls and a very good defense. The castle was besieged by Sultan Baybars. This man conveyed a forged letter to the garrison, supposedly from the Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller in Tripoli, which granted permission for them to surrender. They did, and Baybar got the castle. The Turks had the Turan tactic. The army would formate into a crescent, with the arms of the crescent being the armored, strong divisions, and middle front being the fastest divisions, and middle back being the highest firepower, the cannons. They'd start the battle lined up and charge, then the fast middle front guys would start retreating to the lines behind the middle back, the cannons. The arms of the crescent would hold firm because they were the armored part. The enemy would think they were retreating completely, because it looks like they're losing their crap and their formation, and would chase after them only to be met with the cannons and to be encircled by the crescent's arms. It was a slaughter of the enemy after that. Back in the English Civil War, there was a certain nobility in battle where you were supposed to be able to see your opponent and you would stand and fight. Cromwell decided this was stupid and in numerous battles would send troops round the side, hidden by trees and bushes, to tear through the cavaliers before the fighting began properly. It was a lot dirtier trick at the time. I think the start of World War II, when the Führer made prisoners dress like Polish soldiers and let them attack Germany so that Germany could run over Poland. Sneaky man. Also promising not to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia after being given all of their border defenses, then proceeding to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia basically unopposed. During the Siege of Kaffa, the Mongols hurled the corpses of the deceased soldiers decimated by the Black Plague into the besieged city. It's considered one of the key events that helped spreading the disease in Western Europe, killing millions. Not so much the dirtiest trick as one of the most hard-nosed decisions. The first V-1 flying bombs, if you're under the age of 40, think first-generation cruise missiles, they were being launched by Germany against London, and they were hitting. They were area weapons, as accuracy was pretty much a mile on any side of the aiming point, but they were coming down in central London. Germany had no agents in Britain, not one. They thought they did, but every agent they sent over was caught and then either turned or eliminated, and the other agents were all fictitious, imaginary ones dreamed up in a British campaign of disinformation that was and is breathtaking. The government decided that they simply didn't want to risk the buildings and architecture and heritage of the heart of London, as quite a lot had been bombed out already. So the agents reported back to Berlin that the V-1s were overshooting their target and coming down in North London. Fake stories planted in newspapers reinforced the deception. The Germans dutifully shortened the range, and the V-1s knocked the crap out of areas of South London. One of the reasons why a lot of Croydon is 1960s concrete is because of the damage done by the V-1s in 1944. Fun fact, the Germans spent more money on the V-1 and V-2 weapons program than the Americans spent on the Manhattan Project. In short, someone said, "Our people are going to die and our buildings are going to be flattened whatever happens, so let it be here." There is something just so very Churchill and Tory about this decision. No, for God's sake, don't let them destroy our monuments. At least let's redirect them into the suburbs where they can only hit poor people. Ah yes, that's better. Some of the USA's tricks during the Cold War to assassinate Fidel Castro were pretty mad. One idea attempted by the CIA included putting thallium salts into his shoes so that his beard, eyebrows, and body hair would fall out. It was considered that this would cause his downfall as no one would take him seriously after that. The US firebombed Tokyo because the houses were mostly made of wood. They knew the city would burn. Even the guy who drafted the plan, Robert McNamara, was ashamed of it. They also tried strapping thermite to bats and releasing them over Japan in the hope that they would roost in the houses, then go off and burn the houses down. The plan was cancelled after all the facilities where this was being tested burned down due to incendiary bats roosting in them. Lots of these will be fairly depressing. As dirty or sneaky tricks go, Operation Mincemeat was crafty. Or at least I'm looking for an excuse to post it. One April morning in 1943, a sardine fisherman spotted the corpse of a British soldier floating in the sea off the coast of Spain, setting in train a course of events that would change the course of World War II. Operation Mincemeat was the most successful wartime deception ever attempted, and certainly the strangest. It hoodwinked Nazi espionage chiefs, sent German troops racing in the wrong direction, and saved thousands of lives by deploying a secret agent who was different, in one crucial respect, from any spy before or since. He was dead. His mission? To convince the Germans that instead of attacking Sicily, the Allied armies would invade Greece. The brainchild of an eccentric RAF officer and a brilliant Jewish barrister, this great deception involved an extraordinary cast of characters including Ian Fleming, who would eventually go on to write the James Bond stories, also a famous forensic pathologist, a beautiful Secret Service secretary, a submarine captain, 3 novelists, an irascible admiral who loved fly fishing, and a dead Welsh tramp. Using fraud, imagination, and seduction, Winston Churchill's team of spies spun a web of deceit so elaborate and so convincing that they began to believe it themselves. From a windowless basement beneath Whitehall, the hoax travelled from London to Scotland to Spain to Germany and ended up on the German Chancellor's desk. There was a time of World War I called Live and Let Live. Both sides essentially refusing to fight and coming out of the trenches together and socializing. After the generals on one side, I think it was the British but I could be wrong, found out about this, they devised a dirty trick. The British lured the Germans out of their trench by playing a traditional German anthem and then cut them all down, thus ending the days of Live and Let Live. It was 184 BC. Hannibal was fighting King Eumenes of Pergamus, who had a superior naval fleet. Hannibal instructed his men to gather up all the snakes they could find and load them into earthen pots. He then sent a fake letter of peace over just to find out which ship was the king's. They focused their attacks on that ship while firing the pots at the fleet to distract them with poisonous snakes on their decks. Hannibal won that battle. I read somewhere about a high-ranking officer in the Chinese military that was infamous among enemies and allies for his cleverness and ability to come up with unique war tactics. During some war, the enemy army was marching towards some strategically valuable location. The general, knowing he couldn't let his army take the location, rode to a town that the army had to pass through to get there and set up his plan. As the enemy army approaches the town, they see this general, all alone, sitting on an arch above the entrance playing a flute. They turn right the frick around and abandon the plan, fearing some brutal and elaborate ambush. The general was bluffing. He was the only person there. The Black Dinner, which happened at Edinburgh Castle in 1440, essentially the real-life version of the Red Wedding. Olga of Kiev's entire campaign against the Drevlians. She had the first set of emissaries buried alive, had a second set locked in a bathhouse and then burned, then she invited a whole bunch more for a funeral feast and had them slaughtered while they were drunk. Then she just marched her soldiers over and took out the rest. Letting the Germans bomb Coventry so that the Germans wouldn't suspect that their codes were cracked and the British knew they were going to bomb Coventry. Maybe when Germany attacked the Soviet Union in 1941, Stalin was so furious and perhaps disappointed that he didn't do any public speeches or appearances for more than 2 weeks. War elephants basically mess everything up. There is one way to defeat them though. You slather some pigs in sticky flammable stuff, set them on fire and let them loose. This freaks the war elephants out and they become useless. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.